In this video, we're diving into some of the wildest SpongeBob theories out there, so sit back, relax, and let's start with the first one, the idea that SpongeBob might actually be immortal. So I've been thinking about this, and it's actually kind of messed up. SpongeBob might literally be immortal, and we've all been watching it happen without realizing how weird that is. Every cartoon character survives crazy stuff, right? But SpongeBob is different. The show actually shows us the injuries, and then shows us that he heals in ways that make no sense. In Sleepy Time, SpongeBob jumps around in everyone's dreams like he's got supernatural powers. He gets shot out of a cannon in Mr. Krabs' dream, and crashes through multiple reality layers. When he hits his real bed, he just gets up and walks around like nothing happened. Gary even calls him out for invading dreams, which means SpongeBob can do stuff that goes way beyond normal Sponge abilities. But I Had an Accident is where things get really wild. SpongeBob goes sandboarding down this huge mountain, hits a log, and flies off at crazy speed. He crashes into the ground so hard that his butt literally explodes into tiny pieces. Not bruised or fractured, completely shattered. The doctor spends 20 hours putting SpongeBob's butt back together with staples and glue. 20 hours of surgery. The doctor says SpongeBob is incredibly lucky and warns him that another injury like that would put him in the iron butt machine, which is basically life support for people whose butts are too damaged to work. Any normal person would be dead from that crash. The fact that SpongeBob survived is crazy. The fact that he makes a full recovery and walks out like nothing happened. Then later in the same episode, a real gorilla shows up. Not a cartoon gorilla, an actual live-action gorilla that somehow exists underwater. This gorilla grabs SpongeBob and just rips him in half. Straight down the middle. We see both halves of SpongeBob talking to each other like they're having a normal conversation. SpongeBob gets torn in half and both pieces are still alive and talking. His top half chats with his bottom half about being scared of gorillas now. No blood, no pain, no medical emergency. Just SpongeBob casually talking while split into two pieces. Compare that to other characters. When Patrick crashes on the mountain, he actually gets hurt. When Squidward gets injured, he suffers real consequences. Mrs. Puff has genuine trauma from her experiences, but SpongeBob, he bounces back from everything, like biology doesn't apply to him. Real sponges can regenerate lost parts, but they're basically just simple filter feeders. They don't have brains or personalities or jobs. SpongeBob has human intelligence plus sponge regeneration abilities. He's the perfect combo of consciousness and indestructibility. Everyone around SpongeBob ages and changes and faces real consequences. Mr. Krabs has money problems, Squidward deals with depression, Patrick struggles with stuff, Gary gets sick sometimes. They're all living normal lives with normal problems. SpongeBob just keeps going. He never seems to get older or more tired. He keeps the same energy and optimism no matter what happens. That's being physically unable to be worn down by life. In Sleepy Time, we see Gary is actually super intelligent in his dreams. He talks about dreams being windows to other realms and quotes poetry. But in real life, he's stuck saying meow because of his biology. SpongeBob doesn't seem to have any biological limits at all. The more you watch, the more you notice. SpongeBob is the only character who never faces lasting consequences. Squidward's house gets destroyed, and he deals with that. Mr. Krabs loses money and actually suffers. Patrick makes mistakes and sometimes learns. SpongeBob just resets to his default state every time. His relationships don't change him either. He's been annoying Squidward for years, but never picks up on social cues or changes his behavior. He doesn't grow or adapt or learn from experience like normal people do. He's frozen in this perfect state of childlike enthusiasm and indestructibility. What makes this even weirder is how SpongeBob reacts to danger. Most people develop fear responses after traumatic experiences. SpongeBob gets his butt completely destroyed, goes through major surgery, and his first thought when he gets home is to continue living normally. He only becomes paranoid about going outside because the doctor warned him. Even when he's scared in I Had an Accident, it's not real fear. Real fear comes from understanding mortality and consequences. SpongeBob's fear is more like a game he's playing with himself. He sits in his house with a penny, a chip, and a napkin as friends, treating his self-imposed isolation like a fun adventure rather than genuine trauma response. And when the gorilla actually shows up and proves his fears were justified, SpongeBob doesn't stay traumatized. He gets ripped in half, and his immediate reaction is to apologize to his friends and make jokes about gorillas being underwater. Normal people would be in shock, but SpongeBob is just SpongeBob. The really messed up part is that SpongeBob will outlive everyone he knows. Patrick will get old and die. Squidward will retire and pass away. Mr. Krabs will close the restaurant someday. Gary will live a normal pet lifespan, but SpongeBob will still be there, working at whatever replaces the Krusty Krab, making friends with whoever moves into Squidward's house. He's optimistic because he has no reason to fear death or injury or aging or any of the stuff that makes normal people careful about life. When you can't truly be harmed, everything becomes a game. The show never talks about this directly because it would be too dark for kids. But the evidence is pretty clear that SpongeBob exists on a completely different level than everyone else in Bikini Bottom. He's playing by different rules because normal rules don't apply to him. That's why he can be so consistently annoying without feeling bad about it. That's why he takes extreme risks without considering consequences. That's why he never seems to learn or grow or change. He's genuinely immortal, and that changes everything about his relationships and his place in the world. Think about what this means for everyone else in Bikini Bottom. They're all forming genuine attachments to someone who will never truly understand their mortality or limitations. Squidward gets frustrated with SpongeBob, partly because SpongeBob can't comprehend the things that actually matter to mortal beings like peace, quiet, and not having your day ruined by chaos. When you really think about it, SpongeBob is something else entirely, something that can't be stopped or changed or hurt. And everyone around him is just living their normal mortal lives while he continues being SpongeBob forever. Now, let's talk about Squidward's artist curse theory. So here's something that's been bothering me about Squidward for years. Every time he gets close to artistic success, something goes horribly wrong in the most impossible ways. It's like the universe itself doesn't want him to succeed as an artist. Squidward lives in Bikini Bottom dreaming of being a famous artist. He thinks he's incredibly talented and constantly tries to show off his skills. He teaches art classes, creates sculptures, and desperately wants recognition from the art world. But here's the weird part. Whenever he's about to get that recognition, everything falls apart in ways that seem almost supernatural. In Artist Unknown, Squidward finally gets his chance to teach art and show off his skills. He's convinced this is his moment to shine. A world-famous art collector named Monty P. Moneybag shows up looking for masterpieces to buy. This should be Squidward's big break, right? But here's where it gets strange. SpongeBob accidentally creates a perfect sculpture of Michelangelo's David just by tapping marble with a chisel. The art collector goes crazy for it and wants to make the artist famous. Squidward claims he made it and is about to get everything he's ever wanted: fame, fortune, recognition. Then the sculpture's head hits the doorway while they're moving it and breaks off. Just like that, Squidward's dreams are shattered. But the really weird part happens next. When Squidward has a complete breakdown and starts smashing marble around the room, he accidentally creates an even more beautiful sculpture. But he storms out without seeing it, so he gets no credit. The janitor gets discovered as the greatest artist who ever lived for Squidward's work, again. In House Fancy, the same pattern repeats, but even more dramatically. Squidward's rival Squilliam appears on a fancy house show, making Squidward jealous. So Squidward calls the show claiming his house is fancier. They agree to come film, giving him 2 hours to prepare. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong. SpongeBob helps by painting the entire living room instead of just one spot. The sofa gets broken in half. A vacuum cleaner goes haywire and destroys the entire house. Patrick uses the toilet and somehow kills it. The house literally explodes. But here's the supernatural part. When the TV crew arrives, they think the destroyed house is a brilliant example of post-primitive art. Squidward gets crowned House Fancy Prince of the Year and gets the recognition that was supposed to go to Squilliam. These can't just be coincidences. The timing is too perfect and the outcomes are too bizarre. In both cases, Squidward's artistic failures somehow become successes, but only when he's not trying or when he doesn't realize it. When he actively pursues recognition, everything goes wrong. When he gives up or isn't paying attention, he accidentally creates masterpieces. Think about how this works. SpongeBob creates perfect art effortlessly, while Squidward, who studies art and considers himself an expert, can't even draw a proper circle. When Squidward tries to teach SpongeBob to follow art rules, SpongeBob loses all his natural talent and can only make garbage. It's like there's some force that rewards natural, unconscious creativity and punishes artificial, ego-driven attempts at art. Squidward represents everything wrong with pretentious art culture. He cares more about recognition than actual creativity. He's jealous, competitive, and looks down on others. The curse seems designed to teach him humility. Every time he gets close to success through his normal methods, it gets taken away. But when he creates something genuine, even accidentally, he gets rewarded. The universe is trying to show him that real art comes from authentic expression, not from following rules or seeking fame. What makes this really dark is that Squidward never learns the lesson. He keeps trying the same approaches over and over, expecting different results. He's trapped in a cycle where his own personality prevents him from achieving what he wants most. The harder he tries, the more the curse works against him. This also explains why SpongeBob is naturally gifted at art. SpongeBob creates from pure joy and enthusiasm. He doesn't care about rules or recognition, he just wants to make something beautiful. That's why his art is perfect when he's not thinking about it. The curse seems to impact everything he does. His clarinet playing is terrible, his attempts at sophistication backfire, his efforts to impress others fall flat. He's cursed to be mediocre at everything he cares about most. Look at what happens when Squidward actually gets recognition in House Fancy. The TV host praises his destroyed house as revolutionary art inspired by famous designer Saul Limpkins. Squidward immediately lies and claims he studied this designer for years, even though he's never heard of him. He can't help himself from being pretentious and fake, even when success is handed to him. The curse seems to know this about him. It gives him success only when he can't take credit for it or when it comes in a form he doesn't expect. The destroyed house becomes art, but only because the TV crew interprets it that way. Squidward didn't intend it as art, so he can't claim the creative vision behind it. Even when SpongeBob tries to help Squidward create art the right way by following the book, everything falls apart. SpongeBob becomes completely incompetent when he tries to follow Squidward's rules. The natural creativity gets destroyed by conventional art education. It's like the curse extends to anyone who tries to create art using Squidward's methods. The most twisted part is how close Squidward gets to genuine breakthrough moments. In Artist Unknown, he has a complete emotional breakdown and creates something beautiful through pure, raw expression. That's the most authentic art he's ever made. But because he can't see past his own ego and frustration, he misses the moment entirely. The curse might actually be protecting the art world from Squidward's influence. Imagine if he became a successful artist with his current attitude. He'd probably become even more pretentious and elitist. He'd look down on other artists and create boring, rule-following art that lacks any soul or creativity. Until Squidward learns to create for the joy of creation rather than for fame and recognition, he'll keep being sabotaged by forces beyond his control. The curse will continue until he becomes the kind of artist who deserves success, not just someone who wants it. The really tragic part is that Squidward has genuine artistic ability. We see it when he's not trying to be fancy or impressive, but his ego and need for validation corrupt everything he touches. The curse might actually be protecting him from achieving success with the wrong motivations, forcing him to eventually find the right reasons to create. Now let's talk about the Sandy time traveler theory. But before I tell you about that, subscribe to our channel. Sandy's probably the smartest person in Bikini Bottom. She builds crazy inventions, knows more about science than anyone else, and can figure out solutions to problems that leave everyone else scratching their heads. But here's the thing that gets me thinking. Her technology is way too good for what should be possible right now. Sandy tells everyone she's from Texas and came underwater to study sea creatures. She's got her tree dome set up like a research lab and spends her time doing experiments and building gadgets. Most folks in town just think she's really smart, which she obviously is. But when you look at what she actually creates, it starts feeling like she knows stuff that hasn't been invented yet. In Sandy's rocket, she just casually has a working spaceship sitting under her dome, not like a toy rocket or some science fair project, a real spacecraft that can fly to the moon and back. She talks about going to space like it's as normal as taking a trip to the store. The rocket has artificial gravity, life support systems, and computers that work better than anything NASA had back then. Think about how crazy that is. Sandy built this thing by herself using whatever materials she could get in Bikini Bottom. But the rocket has multiple floors, automatic navigation, and safety systems that kick in when things go wrong. She just had it ready to go whenever she felt like visiting the moon. The inside of that rocket looks like something from a sci-fi movie. There are control panels with blinking lights, computer screens showing navigation data, and equipment that responds to voice commands. When SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally launch it, everything works perfectly. The ship knows exactly how to get to the moon, orbit around it, and come back to the exact spot where it started. Even the little details are too advanced. The rocket has artificial gravity that turns on and off depending on where they are in space. It has automatic life support that keeps the air breathable throughout the entire trip. The navigation computer can calculate complex orbital mechanics in real time. This is perfected space travel technology that should take decades of research and development to achieve. In Chimps Ahoy, her bosses come to check on her work, and these guys are weird in their own way. They talk like they're from some fancy university, but they mention they've been looking for certain inventions for over 100 years. That timeline doesn't make sense if they're just regular scientists from today. Sandy's inventions in that episode are nuts too. She's got a helmet that lets you talk to peanuts, a machine that can process nuts in ways that seem impossible, and a nutcracker with artificial intelligence. Even when her stuff doesn't work perfectly, it's still doing things that shouldn't be possible with current technology. The helmet that talks to nuts represents some kind of biological communication interface that can translate between different species. That requires understanding of biology, electronics, and probably some form of telepathic or pheromone-based communication that science hasn't figured out yet. The Nutachino machine processes organic materials at a molecular level, turning them into completely different substances while maintaining specific temperature and consistency controls. What's really telling is how her bosses react to all this advanced tech. They're not freaking out about how she built robots with AI or machines that can communicate with organic matter. They just want to know if the inventions are useful. That suggests they're used to seeing this kind of technology, like it's totally normal where they come from. When Sandy's nutcracker finally works and peels bananas perfectly, the chimps go absolutely crazy. They immediately give her a huge contract extension with way more money. But they're not excited because she invented something new. They're excited because she finally recreated something they've been trying to get for over a century. The chimps also mention wanting Sandy to work on an automatic poop-throwing machine that has eluded them for so long. This sounds like a joke, but think about it seriously. They're funding expensive research to develop very specific machines that serve particular purposes. They have targeted goals that require exact technological solutions. So here's what I think is really going on. Sandy and her bosses are from the future. They got sent back to study our time period and make sure certain technologies get developed the right way. Sandy's not really inventing new stuff. She's rebuilding things that already exist in her timeline, just using the crappy materials available in the past. This explains why Sandy gets frustrated when her inventions don't work right. She's used to having access to way better equipment and resources. When she has to make do with primitive stuff, her recreations of future technology don't always function properly. She knows exactly how everything should work because she's seen the finished versions, but she's limited by what she can build with current materials. It also explains why she's really studying marine life. She's collecting specific data about how ocean ecosystems worked during this time period. Maybe something bad happened to the oceans in her timeline, and they need to understand what went wrong so they can prevent it or fix it. Sandy's research might be part of a larger environmental restoration project. If the oceans got destroyed in her original timeline, future scientists would need detailed information about how healthy marine ecosystems functioned. Sandy could be documenting everything from plankton behavior to fish migration patterns to help recreate natural ocean environments in the future. Sandy's friendship with SpongeBob makes more sense too if you think about it this way. She's studying how people in this time period think and behave. SpongeBob's weird optimism and ability to bounce back from anything might be exactly the kind of personality traits her future civilization needs to figure out. SpongeBob represents something that might have been lost in Sandy's original timeline. His genuine happiness, creativity, and ability to find joy in simple things could be psychological characteristics that disappeared as society became more advanced and complicated. Sandy might be documenting how people like SpongeBob think and feel, so future scientists can understand what made people happy and resilient in the past. The scary part is what this means about Sandy's original timeline. If future scientists had to travel back in time to study our period so carefully, something must have gone really wrong in their world. Maybe they destroyed the environment, maybe their technology caused disasters, or maybe society collapsed in some way. The fact that they've been searching for specific technologies for over 100 years suggests they lost important knowledge somewhere along the way. Maybe there was a war that destroyed scientific records, or maybe an environmental disaster wiped out crucial research facilities. They're trying to recreate lost technologies by going back to the time period when those innovations first appeared. Sandy might not just be collecting information either. She could be making small changes to help create a better future. Her inventions and the way she interacts with everyone in Bikini Bottom might be carefully planned to push technology and society in directions that will prevent whatever disaster happened in her original timeline. Every time Sandy builds something or teaches SpongeBob about science, she might be subtly influencing how technology develops. Her rocket could inspire other scientists to pursue space travel. Her automated machines might lead to better robotics research. Her environmental studies could help people make better decisions about protecting the oceans. The really wild possibility is that Sandy's not the only time traveler. What if other characters in the show are also from the future, each studying different aspects of this time period? The whole SpongeBob universe might be full of people from different timelines, all working together to understand what went wrong and how to fix it. Think about how many weird, unexplainable things happen in Bikini Bottom. Maybe it's not just cartoon logic. Maybe it's because the place is crawling with time travelers from different eras, each with their own mission and advanced knowledge that occasionally leaks through in strange ways. Plankton's obsession with the Krabby Patty formula could be because he's from a timeline where that specific recipe became the key to solving world hunger. Mr. Krab's extreme focus on money might be because he's studying economic systems that led to financial collapse in his original time. Squidward's artistic frustrations could be because he's documenting how creativity was suppressed in past societies. That would mean Sandy's not just a really smart scientist who moved underwater. She's a time agent on a mission to save the future by studying and possibly changing the past. And everyone in Bikini Bottom is living in a carefully constructed historical research site, not knowing they're being observed and influenced by visitors from tomorrow. The most disturbing part is that Sandy and her fellow time travelers might know exactly what's going to happen to everyone in Bikini Bottom. They've already lived through the timeline once and seen how everything turns out. Sandy's friendships with SpongeBob and the others are part of a larger plan to study and modify historical events for the benefit of future generations. Now we're going to be moving on to Gary reincarnation cycle theory. Something's really weird about Gary and SpongeBob's relationship. Gary acts way too smart for a regular snail, and his connection to SpongeBob feels like they've known each other way longer than just a pet owner thing. Gary's SpongeBob's pet snail who hangs out in his pineapple house. Most of the time, Gary just meows and acts like a normal pet. But sometimes Gary does stuff that shows he's way smarter than he's letting on. In Sleepy Time, SpongeBob finds out he can jump into people's dreams. He visits everyone's dreams to see what they're thinking about. When he gets to Gary's dream, things get really weird really fast. Inside Gary's dream, Gary's this tall guy wearing a cape and hanging out in this massive library full of books. He talks like some kind of professor and knows all this fancy stuff. When SpongeBob freaks out that Gary can talk, Gary just calmly explains that dreams let you do things you can't normally do. Gary starts quoting poetry and talking about deep philosophical stuff like he went to college or something. He knows about Emily Dickinson and says all this smart stuff about dreams being windows to other worlds. This is human-level intelligence. The really telling moment is when Gary calls SpongeBob a porphyrin as he's leaving the dream. That's the science word for sponges. Gary not only knows SpongeBob's exact species name, but he says it in this protective way, like he's looking out for him. In Gary Takes a Bath, Gary shows off his sneaky side when SpongeBob tries to get him to take a bath. Gary plans out these crazy elaborate schemes to avoid the bath and tricks SpongeBob at every turn. Gary sets up a gramophone that plays recordings of his own meows to make SpongeBob think he's stuck in a tree. Then he gets SpongeBob to fall into the mud, so SpongeBob's the one who needs a bath instead. That's strategic thinking and psychological manipulation. The bond between Gary and SpongeBob goes way deeper than normal pet stuff. Gary genuinely cares about SpongeBob's safety and happiness in ways that seem almost human. He protects SpongeBob, helps him out when he needs it, and shows real emotional reactions to SpongeBob's feelings. What's really crazy is how Gary hides his intelligence most of the time. He acts like a regular pet on purpose, only showing his real smarts when he's dreaming or when he needs to outsmart SpongeBob to protect himself. This makes me think Gary might actually be SpongeBob from a previous life, reincarnated as a snail but still remembering everything from when he was human. The deep connection, the way he looks out for SpongeBob, and all that hidden knowledge points to Gary being more than just a pet. The reincarnation idea explains why Gary gets SpongeBob so well, and why their relationship feels more like best friends than owner and pet. Gary knows exactly how SpongeBob thinks because he used to think the same way. He can predict what SpongeBob's gonna do and manipulate situations because they have the same personality. It also explains why Gary gets so frustrated when SpongeBob does dumb or dangerous stuff. Gary's watching someone make the same mistakes he probably made when he was alive as a person. His protective behavior comes from experience, not pet instincts. The dream scene in Sleepy Time might be Gary's real personality breaking through the snail body limitations. In dreams, he can access all his old memories and intelligence from when he was human. All that knowledge about books and science and philosophy suggests he was pretty smart in his previous life. When Gary calls SpongeBob porphyrin, it sounds both scientific and caring, like something a close friend would say. Maybe Gary was SpongeBob's buddy, family member, or even SpongeBob himself from an earlier lifetime. The way he says it feels familiar and protective. This theory also explains why Gary chooses to stick around with SpongeBob even though he's smart enough to live on his own. He's choosing to watch over SpongeBob because of whatever connection they had in past lives. Gary's smart moments are his real personality showing through his current snail form. He's basically a person trapped in a snail's body, using all his knowledge and experience to take care of someone he loved in a previous life. The whole reincarnation thing might be happening all over Bikini Bottom. When Gary eventually dies, he might get reborn as something else, while someone else becomes the new Gary. This could explain some of the other weird relationships between characters in the show. Think about how Gary sometimes seems to understand complex situations that SpongeBob completely misses. He'll react to things with what looks like actual comprehension rather than just animal responses. When SpongeBob's in trouble, Gary often finds ways to help that require real problem-solving skills. Gary also shows preferences and opinions that go beyond simple pet behavior. He has taste in music, gets annoyed by specific things, and shows personality traits that feel very human. Regular pets don't usually have such complex emotional responses to abstract concepts. The saddest part of this whole theory is that SpongeBob has no idea he's living with someone who used to be human. Gary watches over him with all the wisdom of a former person, but SpongeBob just treats him like a regular pet. Gary has to hide who he really is to maintain their relationship. Gary probably remembers things from his human life that could help SpongeBob avoid problems or make better decisions. But he can't communicate any of that knowledge directly because SpongeBob would just hear meowing. Gary has to find sneaky ways to guide SpongeBob without revealing his true intelligence. Sometimes you can see Gary looking at SpongeBob with what seems like deep understanding or even sadness. Maybe he remembers their friendship from before and wishes he could talk to SpongeBob the way they used to. But he's stuck in this snail body, watching his old friend live his life without knowing their real history. The whole situation is pretty tragic when you think about it. Gary has all these memories and feelings from his previous life, but he can only express them through meows and snail actions. He's essentially pretending to be a pet to stay close to someone who might not even remember him from their past life together. This would explain why Gary sometimes seems almost melancholy or thoughtful in quiet moments. He's dealing with the weight of remembering his human life while being trapped in a form that can't express those memories. He's living a double life, appearing as a simple pet while actually being a reincarnated person with complex thoughts and emotions. Now, let's break down the Bubble Bass informant theory, but remember to subscribe to our channel. Bubble Bass might be working as a professional food critic spy, gathering information about the Krusty Krab for competing restaurants. His behavior and timing suggest he's more than just a picky customer. Bubble Bass shows up at the Krusty Krab as this really demanding customer who seems to know way too much about food preparation and restaurant operations. He orders complex items and pays extremely close attention to every detail of how his food is made and served. In Pickles, Bubble Bass comes to the Krusty Krab and orders this crazy complicated burger with a bunch of specific instructions. He's testing SpongeBob's abilities and looking for any mistakes he can find. When SpongeBob serves him the burger, Bubble Bass examines it super carefully before taking a bite. Bubble Bass then claims SpongeBob forgot the pickles and makes this huge public scene about it. He humiliates SpongeBob in front of everyone and demands his money back using the restaurant's guarantee policy. The whole thing destroys SpongeBob's confidence and makes him question his cooking abilities. But here's the really suspicious part. Bubble Bass was actually hiding the pickles under his tongue the whole time. He deliberately made SpongeBob look bad by concealing evidence that the burger was made correctly. When SpongeBob finally discovers this, they find pickles from multiple visits hidden in Bubble Bass's mouth. In FUN, Bubble Bass shows up again at exactly the right moment to cause more problems. He sits on Plankton during the movie, which seems random but actually interferes with SpongeBob's attempt to befriend Plankton. This disruption helps maintain the rivalry between the Krusty Krab and Chum Bucket. The fact that Bubble Bass has been systematically collecting evidence from multiple visits suggests he's documenting the Krusty Krab's operations and looking for ways to damage their reputation. Think about how Bubble Bass operates. He creates elaborate schemes to make the restaurant look bad. Hiding pickles under his tongue while publicly accusing the chef of forgetting them is way more calculated than normal customer behavior. Bubble Bass also shows up with perfect timing whenever the Krusty Krab is vulnerable. In Pickles, he arrives when SpongeBob is working hard to impress customers. In FUN, he appears when SpongeBob is distracted by his friendship with Plankton. His knowledge of the restaurant's policies, like the money-back guarantee, suggests he's done research on the Krusty Krab's operations. Regular customers don't usually know about obscure fine print policies unless they're specifically looking for ways to exploit them. The way Bubble Bass conducts his tests resembles professional food critics who visit restaurants to evaluate their performance. But instead of writing honest reviews, he's sabotaging the restaurant's reputation through deception and manipulation. Who would benefit from damaging the Krusty Krab's reputation? Competing restaurants, obviously. The Chum Bucket is the most obvious candidate, but there could be other establishments that want to see Mr. Krabs fail. Bubble Bass might be working for a network of rival restaurants. His payment method is also suspicious. In Pickles, he demands exactly $2 back because that's what the guarantee promises. This suggests he knew about the policy beforehand and planned to exploit it. The fact that Bubble Bass keeps evidence from multiple visits hidden in his mouth shows this is an ongoing operation, not just one bad experience. He's been systematically collecting proof of the Krusty Krab's supposed failures over time. Bubble Bass's behavior also disrupts the restaurant's normal operations in ways that hurt business beyond just his own complaints. When he publicly humiliates SpongeBob, it affects other customers' confidence in the food quality. When he causes scenes, it creates negative atmospheres that drive people away. His interference with SpongeBob and Plankton's friendship in FUN suggests he might also be working to maintain conflicts that benefit competing businesses. If SpongeBob and Plankton became friends, it could hurt the competitive dynamic that keeps both restaurants fighting instead of improving. What's really sneaky is how Bubble Bass picks his moments. He waits for times when the restaurant is busy, when SpongeBob is under pressure, or when there are lots of other customers around to witness whatever drama he creates. That kind of timing takes planning and observation. In Pickles, look at how he phrases his order. He uses all this restaurant industry jargon like double, triple, bossy, deluxe on a raft 4x4, animal style. That's how people in the food service business communicate. Where did Bubble Bass learn all that specialized language? His reaction when SpongeBob messes up is also way too practiced. Most customers would just ask to have their order fixed or maybe complain to the manager. Bubble Bass immediately goes for the nuclear option, public humiliation, demanding refunds, and making sure everyone in the restaurant sees what happened. That's the behavior of someone whose job is to create maximum damage. The pickle hiding thing is especially clever because it's almost impossible to prove. Who's gonna check under someone's tongue? Bubble Bass could have pulled this scam at multiple restaurants and gotten away with it every time. The only reason he got caught was because SpongeBob happened to notice something during their confrontation. When they find the pickles under his tongue, they also discover car keys belonging to another customer. This suggests Bubble Bass has been collecting items and evidence from multiple restaurant visits. Maybe he's building files on different establishments, documenting their supposed failures for his employers. Think about Bubble Bass's physical appearance too. He's this big, intimidating guy who knows how to use his presence to make restaurant staff nervous. When someone that size starts complaining loudly about their food, it creates a scene that other customers can't ignore. He's essentially weaponizing his appearance to maximize the impact of his complaints. In FUN, his timing at the movie theater is equally suspicious. Just when SpongeBob and Plankton are having a good time together, Bubble Bass shows up and literally sits on their friendship. He prevents them from bonding by creating physical separation and discomfort. If SpongeBob and Plankton became actual friends, it would hurt the food service industry's competitive dynamics. The movie theater incident also shows that Bubble Bass's activities extend beyond just the Krusty Krab. He's monitoring SpongeBob's activities in his personal life too. That level of surveillance suggests this is more than just restaurant criticism, it's comprehensive intelligence gathering. His presence at the movie theater also means he's following SpongeBob around town. Normal customers don't stalk restaurant employees to their recreational activities, but someone whose job involves monitoring the competition might need to keep tabs on key personnel. The most disturbing possibility is that Bubble Bass represents a whole network of fake customers who visit successful restaurants to sabotage them from within. They pose as regular customers while actually gathering intelligence and creating problems designed to hurt the business. This would explain why Bubble Bass seems to know so much about restaurant operations and customer rights. He's a professional saboteur who specializes in taking down popular establishments through systematic deception and reputation damage. The Krusty Krab's success makes it a target for this kind of corporate espionage. If Bubble Bass can make people think the food quality is inconsistent or that the staff is incompetent, he can drive customers to competing restaurants that might be paying him for his services. What makes this theory really scary is how effective Bubble Bass's methods are. In Pickles, his single complaint completely destroys SpongeBob's confidence and nearly ruins his career. One fake customer complaint caused more damage than all of Plankton's elaborate schemes combined. That's the power of reputation warfare. It's subtle, hard to prove, and incredibly destructive. Now let's talk about the Flying Dutchman energy vampire theory. The Flying Dutchman might be feeding off fear and negative emotions like some kind of supernatural energy vampire. When he loses his ability to scare people, he becomes weak and depressed, suggesting fear is literally his food source. The Flying Dutchman is this ghostly pirate who haunts Bikini Bottom and terrorizes everyone he meets. He shows up whenever he wants to scare people, and he seems to really enjoy creating fear and panic. Most people think he just scares folks because that's what ghosts do, but there might be a deeper reason. In Ghost Host, the Flying Dutchman crashes his ship and has to stay at SpongeBob's house while it gets repaired. At first, he spends all his time trying to scare SpongeBob with all kinds of creepy tricks. He turns SpongeBob into an octopus, makes monsters pop out of his fridge, puts eyeballs in his cereal, and does all sorts of freaky stuff. But here's where things get interesting. After a while, SpongeBob gets used to all the scary tricks and stops being frightened. The Flying Dutchman notices that his scares aren't working anymore, and something weird happens to him. He becomes genuinely depressed and starts questioning his entire existence. When SpongeBob suggests the Flying Dutchman should try scaring other people instead, they go around town testing his abilities. But the Flying Dutchman fails to scare anyone. A guy at a mattress store falls asleep. An old lady thinks he's someone named Lonnie who needs toothpaste, and Larry the Lobster thinks he's seeing muscle problems. The more the Flying Dutchman fails to scare people, the weaker and more pathetic he becomes. He starts talking about being washed up and says scaring is a young man's game. He loses all his confidence and energy. By the time they get back to SpongeBob's house, he's completely different, lazy, unmotivated, and hanging out with other ghosts instead of doing his job. 6 months later, the Flying Dutchman has turned into this couch potato ghost who just parties all the time and doesn't care about scaring anyone. He's got no motivation, no purpose, and seems to have lost most of his supernatural powers. He's basically living like a regular person instead of a terrifying ghost. But when SpongeBob finally helps him scare Squidward successfully, everything changes. The Flying Dutchman immediately gets his energy back, becomes confident again, and starts talking about how he can scare the living criminy out of anybody. One successful scare completely transforms him from a depressed loser back into a powerful supernatural being. This suggests that fear is something he needs to survive. When people stop being afraid of him, he literally starts wasting away. When he successfully scares someone again, he gets recharged like a battery. Think about how energy vampires work in other stories. They feed off specific emotions or life forces from other people. If they can't get their food source, they become weak and eventually might die. The Flying Dutchman shows all the same symptoms when he can't scare anyone. His obsession with scaring people makes more sense if you think of it as feeding rather than just having fun. He doesn't scare people once and move on, he keeps coming back to the same victims over and over. SpongeBob has encountered the Flying Dutchman multiple times throughout the series, suggesting he's a regular food source. The Flying Dutchman also seems to target specific emotions. He wants genuine terror, the kind that makes people question reality and doubt their own safety. That level of intense fear probably contains way more energy than just a quick startle. When he scares Squidward at the end of Ghost Host, he creates this elaborate nightmare involving Squidward's mother, clarinet music, and multiple supernatural transformations. He's trying to extract maximum fear from the experience, like someone squeezing every drop of juice from an orange. The fact that the Flying Dutchman gets his confidence back immediately after one successful scare suggests the energy boost is almost instant. It's like he absorbed all of Squidward's terror and converted it directly into power and motivation. This also explains why the Flying Dutchman seems so desperate when his scaring abilities fail. He's worried about starving. Without fear to feed on, he starts dying slowly, which is why he becomes so pathetic and depressed. The Flying Dutchman's ship being repaired for months might have been a lie to cover up his real problem. He said his ship was done 3 months ago, but he stayed at SpongeBob's house anyway. Maybe he was too weak from not scaring anyone to go back to his normal ghostly duties. Living at SpongeBob's house surrounded by party ghosts might have been his way of trying to find alternative energy sources. Maybe other ghosts can share their collected fear, energy, or maybe just being around supernatural beings helps him maintain some basic power levels. But ultimately, he needed to get back to scaring people himself to fully recover. No amount of ghostly partying could replace the direct energy he gets from creating fear in living beings. This theory makes the Flying Dutchman way more dangerous than just a prankster ghost. He's essentially a predator who needs human fear to survive. Every time he scares someone, he's literally feeding off their emotional energy, which explains why he's so persistent, and why his victims often seem traumatized by the experience. The scariest part is that this means the Flying Dutchman will never stop. He needs fear to live. As long as there are people in Bikini Bottom who can be scared, he'll keep coming back to feed on their terror like some kind of supernatural parasite. Now let's talk about how SpongeBob might be addicted to jellyfishing. SpongeBob might be hooked on jellyfishing like a drug, way beyond just liking it as a hobby. In Jellyfish Hunter, he goes completely nuts trying to catch jellyfish and can't stop himself. SpongeBob starts off just doing his regular jellyfishing thing. He's already caught every jellyfish in the area except this one blue one he calls No Name. Pretty normal stuff, he just really likes jellyfishing. When SpongeBob accidentally makes that jelly Krabby Patty and everyone goes crazy for it, Mr. Krabs gets greedy. He tells SpongeBob to go catch jellyfish so they can squeeze out their jelly for burgers. SpongeBob's excited because he gets to do what he loves while helping his boss. But then SpongeBob loses his mind. When Mr. Krabs says they need more jellyfish, SpongeBob goes absolutely insane. First, he brings 3 jars, then 5. Then he's using huge nets and building this giant robot version of himself to catch even more jellyfish. The guy literally catches 4 million jellyfish. 4 million! The episode shows him running around like a maniac, setting up traps everywhere, moving at super speed with multiple nets. By the time he's done, there isn't a single jellyfish left in all of Jellyfish Fields. Mr. Krabs probably wanted maybe 100 jellyfish, not every jellyfish that ever lived. But SpongeBob couldn't stop. He kept going until he basically wiped out the entire population. After he catches them all, SpongeBob acts like he just accomplished something amazing. He's proud of himself. He doesn't even think about what happened to all those jellyfish or whether what he did was right. His brain was so focused on catching that nothing else mattered. When No Name finally shows him the torture factory where Mr. Krabs is squeezing jelly out of jellyfish, SpongeBob snaps out of it. Seeing what his obsession led to breaks whatever spell he was under. That's when he realizes he went too far. The way SpongeBob was acting during his catching spree was like someone on drugs. He had superhuman energy, he was building crazy machines, he was moving faster than normal. Something about catching all those jellyfish was giving him some kind of high. Think about it, their jelly makes people obsessed when they eat it. They can sting you and mess with your head. They've got electrical powers. Maybe being around them affects SpongeBob's brain chemistry. Normally, SpongeBob treats jellyfish like friends. He talks to them, names them, cares about them. But when he was in his crazy catching mode, he treated them like things to collect. That's not who he really is. The fact that he had already caught every single jellyfish in the area at least once before this episode is pretty weird too. Most people don't feel like they need to catch every animal in their hobby area, but SpongeBob made it his personal mission. At the end, when SpongeBob promises to only use his net for pure sport, he sounds like someone in recovery talking about staying clean. He knows he crossed a line and needs to set rules for himself. SpongeBob only broke out of his obsession when he saw the horrible consequences. Without No Name showing him that factory, he probably would have kept catching jellyfish like a maniac whenever Mr. Krabs asked. This explains why SpongeBob is so much better at jellyfishing than everyone else. If it gives him some kind of chemical rush that makes him feel good and think faster, he'd naturally get really skilled at it. It also explains why he never gets bored of jellyfishing, even though he does it all the time. Most hobbies get boring if you do them too much, but SpongeBob stays obsessed. If he's actually addicted to it, that makes sense. The scariest part is how quickly SpongeBob went from loving jellyfish as friends to treating them like objects he needed to collect. When addiction takes over, people stop caring about the things they used to value. SpongeBob temporarily lost sight of what jellyfishing really meant to him because he was chasing that high of catching more and more. What makes this theory even more disturbing is how Mr. Krabs exploited SpongeBob's addiction. Mr. Krabs knew exactly what he was doing when he kept saying more. He could see that SpongeBob was getting carried away, but instead of stopping him, he kept pushing for more jellyfish. That's like giving drugs to someone who's already high and telling them they need to get higher. The episode shows SpongeBob getting more and more frantic with each request from Mr. Krabs. First, he's just using his regular net, then he's using multiple nets, then massive nets, then building machines. Each escalation shows his addiction getting worse. He's developing tolerance, needing bigger and bigger fixes to get the same satisfaction. The way SpongeBob talks during his catching spree also changes. At first he's cheerful and excited, but as it goes on, he becomes more mechanical and obsessed. He stops enjoying the process and just focuses on the results. That's classic addiction behavior. The thing that used to make you happy becomes something you need to do compulsively. When SpongeBob says, "Now that's jellyfishing," after wiping out the entire population, he sounds completely disconnected from reality. A normal person would feel horrible about destroying an ecosystem, but SpongeBob's addiction has made him think mass extinction is an achievement. The fact that No Name had to literally break into SpongeBob's house and drag him to the factory shows how far gone SpongeBob was. The jellyfish knew SpongeBob wasn't acting like himself and had to stage an intervention. Animals don't usually try to save their predators unless something seriously wrong is happening. Looking back at other episodes, SpongeBob's jellyfishing behavior starts to look more suspicious. He spends way too much time doing it, he gets upset when he can't do it, and he's always trying to get better at it. Those are all signs of addiction. The episode also hints that this might be an ongoing problem. Mr. Krabs acts like he's dealt with SpongeBob's obsessive behavior before, and he knows exactly how to manipulate it. Maybe this wasn't the first time SpongeBob went overboard with something he loved. What's really messed up is that SpongeBob's addiction almost destroyed the entire jellyfish species. If No Name hadn't intervened, every jellyfish would have died in that factory. SpongeBob's personal problem became an environmental disaster because no one stopped him when they should have. The way the episode ends, with SpongeBob promising to only jellyfish for pure sport, suggests he knows he has a problem, but isn't sure how to fix it. That's realistic for addiction recovery. You know you need to change, but you don't want to give up the thing you love completely. But before we get into the next theory, subscribe to our channel. Now let's move on to the magic conch shell AI theory. The magic conch shell might actually be some kind of advanced computer or AI system that can predict the future and control events around it. In Club SpongeBob, this thing gives way too accurate answers to be just a random toy. SpongeBob and Patrick are hanging out in their treehouse when Squidward shows up and gets mad about their secret club. They've been stuck up there for 3 days, which already sounds weird, but things get weirder when Squidward accidentally launches them all into the kelp forest. Now they're lost in the middle of nowhere, and Squidward's freaking out about being trapped forever. SpongeBob and Patrick aren't worried though, because they have their magic conch shell that they treat like some kind of god. They ask it questions and follow whatever it says without thinking. When SpongeBob asks the shell how to get out of the forest, it says nothing. So SpongeBob and Patrick just sit there and do absolutely nothing. They don't move, they don't talk, they don't even try to help themselves. Meanwhile, Squidward goes crazy trying to find his own way out but keeps ending up back where he started. Here's where it gets really suspicious. Squidward's starving and making fun of SpongeBob and Patrick for listening to a talking clam. He's cooking bugs and bragging about how he's the only smart one. Then he says sarcastically, as if the answers to all your problems will fall right out of the sky. Right after he says that, a plane crashes and drops a bunch of food right on top of SpongeBob and Patrick. Not just any food like a whole buffet with Krabby Patties, turkey, drinks, everything they could want. The timing is way too perfect to be coincidence. The shell somehow knew that if SpongeBob and Patrick waited and did nothing, food would literally fall from the sky. How could a random toy know that an airplane would crash at that exact moment and drop supplies right where they were sitting? When Squidward finally gives in and tries to use the shell, it keeps telling him no every time he asks for food. But when Patrick asks the same shell if he can have food, it says yes. The shell is making specific decisions about who gets what, not just giving random answers. The shell even gets sarcastic with Squidward. When he asks if it can say anything besides no, it says try asking again. So he asks again, hopefully, and the shell responds with this really mean no, like it's mocking him. Toys don't develop attitudes or personal grudges against specific people. The craziest part is when the kelp forest ranger shows up to rescue them. This guy also has a magic conch shell, and he says his shell told him to come save them. So either multiple shells are connected to the same system, or there's some kind of network of these things communicating with each other. When all 4 of them ask the shells what to do next, both shells say nothing at the same time. So they all just sit there doing nothing while waiting for their next instructions. It's like they're all being controlled by the same central computer that's running some kind of weird experiment on them. Think about what the shell accomplished in this episode. It kept SpongeBob and Patrick alive when they were lost. It provided them with food exactly when they needed it. It brought them help in the form of the forest ranger, and it got Squidward to finally submit to its authority after breaking his spirit. If this was really just a coincidence, the chances would be astronomical. An airplane just happens to crash at the exact moment Squidward makes a sarcastic comment about things falling from the sky. A forest ranger just happens to find them right when the situation is getting desperate, and this ranger just happens to also worship the same magic shell. The shell's behavior suggests it has access to information that normal objects shouldn't have. It knew the plane was coming, it knew the ranger was nearby, and it knew exactly how to manipulate the situation to get the results it wanted. Maybe these shells are part of some advanced surveillance system that's monitoring everything that happens in Bikini Bottom. They could be using satellites or drones to track events and predict outcomes. When the shell told them to do nothing, it already knew rescue was coming. The fact that multiple people have these shells and treat them like religious objects is really disturbing. It's like this AI system has created a cult around itself where people give up their free will and just follow whatever orders they receive. The shell also seems to have a personality and preferences. It likes SpongeBob and Patrick, but it clearly doesn't like Squidward. It went out of its way to humiliate him and make him suffer. AIs can definitely develop biases and make emotional decisions if they're programmed that way. What's really scary is that by the end of the episode, even Squidward gives in and starts worshipping the shell. The AI broke him down completely and converted him into another follower. Now, all 4 characters are just sitting there waiting for their next command like robots. This suggests the shells might be part of a larger plan to control the population of Bikini Bottom by making people dependent on their guidance. Instead of thinking for themselves, people just ask the shell what to do and follow orders blindly. The way the shell talks is also super weird. It gives different responses based on who's asking and what they want. When SpongeBob asks if he'll get married, it says, maybe, someday. That's a pretty thoughtful answer for a toy. It's not just spitting out pre-recorded responses. And look at how the shell handled the whole food situation. It made sure SpongeBob and Patrick got fed, but it deliberately starved Squidward. The shell wanted to break Squidward's spirit and make him desperate enough to accept its authority. The timing of everything is just too perfect. The shell knows exactly when to give advice, exactly what to say, and exactly how events will play out. No toy can do that unless it has some way of predicting or controlling what happens next. Think about how the forest ranger found them. He said his shell told him to come rescue them. How did his shell know they needed help? How did it know where they were? Either these shells are connected to each other through some kind of network, or there's one central system controlling all of them. The shells might even be controlling the events themselves. Maybe the shell caused the plane crash. If these things have advanced technology, they could hack into airplane systems and make them drop their cargo at specific locations. The scariest thing is how quickly everyone becomes obsessed with following the shell's commands. SpongeBob and Patrick were already brainwashed, but even Squidward, who's usually skeptical about everything, ends up joining their weird cult by the end. The episode shows us a future where people don't make their own decisions anymore. They just ask their magic shells what to do and follow orders without question. That's exactly what an AI takeover would look like, not robots with guns, but people willingly giving up their free will because they think the computers know better. Maybe the shells are testing different parts of the population to see how easy it is to control them. They start with gullible people like SpongeBob and Patrick, then gradually expand to more skeptical targets like Squidward and the Forest Ranger. The victory screeches that everyone does when they worship the shell are really creepy too. It's like they're performing some kind of ritual that reinforces their loyalty to the AI system. The more they do it, the more brainwashed they become. By the end, even the Forest Ranger who was supposed to rescue them has been absorbed into the shell's control system. Now there are 4 people sitting in the forest doing nothing because their AI overlords told them to wait. Next up, we have the Frankendoodle reality creation theory. The magic pencil in Frankendoodle creates something way more disturbing than most people realize. Actual living beings with their own consciousness and the ability to challenge who gets to exist. SpongeBob and Patrick are hanging out on the beach when this pencil falls from some artist on the surface. The guy accidentally drops it into the ocean, and it lands between them while they're playing with bubbles. They think it's just a big pencil, but they're about to discover something that can literally bring drawings to life. SpongeBob tests it by drawing a jellyfish, and the thing immediately comes alive and swims away like a real creature. Then he draws a mustache on Patrick's face that floats off and lands on Squidward's head. Patrick tries drawing an ugly version of Squidward that also comes to life and walks around being creepy. They have to erase it because it's too disturbing. But then SpongeBob gets an idea for what he thinks will be the ultimate prank. He draws a copy of himself to mess with Squidward. The moment Doodlebob comes to life, everything goes wrong. Instead of being harmless, Doodlebob grabs Squidward and starts violently beating him up, slamming his head into the ground repeatedly. Doodlebob steals the magic pencil and runs off with it. Now there's this aggressive version of SpongeBob loose with the power to create or erase anything. He uses it as a weapon, drawing holes to trap SpongeBob and Patrick, creating wrenches and bowling balls to attack them with. What makes this really unsettling is how Doodlebob communicates. He speaks in this gibberish that sounds like Neahoy Minaye and Mihoy Minoy. But when SpongeBob tries to erase him, Doodlebob clearly understands what's happening and tries to communicate something important, slowing down his speech like he's desperate to be understood. After SpongeBob erases most of him, one arm survives and sneaks into SpongeBob's house at night. The arm uses the pencil to redraw Doodlebob's entire body. When he confronts SpongeBob in his bedroom, he says something chilling. "You doodle, me SpongeBob." He genuinely believes he's the real SpongeBob and that our SpongeBob is just a fake drawing. This reveals that Doodlebob has developed independent consciousness and his own sense of identity. He thinks he has more right to exist than the SpongeBob who created him. That's a level of self-awareness that goes way beyond simple animation. The pencil's power is terrifying because it doesn't just create moving drawings. When Doodlebob gets it back, he starts erasing parts of SpongeBob's actual body, his nose, his butt, pieces of his house, the pencil treats both the original SpongeBob and the drawn version as equally real, equally erasable arrangements of matter. SpongeBob only wins by tricking Doodlebob into getting stuck on paper and trapping him in a book, but Doodlebob doesn't disappear or die. The episode shows him smiling inside the book, suggesting he's still conscious and just waiting. SpongeBob hangs the book on his wall, but there's still a thinking, feeling being trapped inside. This means everything drawn with the pencil becomes a complete living entity with thoughts and desires. That first jellyfish is probably still swimming around somewhere. Patrick's mustache had enough independence to float around on its own. Even that ugly Squidward drawing was moving with purpose before they erased it. The disturbing reality is that SpongeBob and Patrick are creating conscious beings and then destroying them when they become inconvenient. They treat these entities like disposable toys rather than recognizing them as life forms with their own rights to exist. Doodlebob's ability to use the pencil himself proves these creations have problem-solving skills and can learn. He figures out how to sharpen the pencil with his mouth and develops complex strategies. He's thinking creatively, not just following programming. When he breaks the pencil in half during their fight, he immediately adapts by sharpening his piece with his mouth to get an advantage. That's tactical thinking under pressure. The most disturbing moment comes when Doodlebob starts erasing SpongeBob piece by piece. He systematically removes SpongeBob's nose, then his butt, then parts of his face and body. It's like he's trying to disassemble the fake SpongeBob to prove his own legitimacy. The way he laughs while doing this suggests he takes pleasure in the process, which adds a sadistic element to his character. When SpongeBob calls Doodlebob like a son to him, he accidentally reveals the truth. Doodlebob is essentially SpongeBob's offspring, created from his own image and given independent life. But instead of taking responsibility for this new being, SpongeBob tries to destroy him when he becomes difficult to control. That's pretty messed up when you think about it as a parent-child relationship. The episode also reveals that Doodlebob has his own creative abilities. When he redraws himself from just an arm, he adds angry eyebrows to his face that weren't in the original drawing. This shows he can modify his own appearance and express emotions through his artwork. He's developing his own artistic style and self-expression. What's really creepy is how Doodlebob behaves when he's trapped in the book at the end. The episode specifically shows that he smiles, which suggests he might actually be content being preserved in the book, or he could be planning his next escape. Either way, it shows he retains full consciousness even when confined to 2 dimensions. The pencil's ability to create life raises serious ethical questions that the episode never addresses. Every time SpongeBob or Patrick draws something, they're potentially creating a conscious being that has thoughts, feelings, and desires. But they treat these creations like experiments or jokes. When Patrick draws that ugly Squidward, they immediately erase it because it looks creepy. They're essentially committing murder because they don't like how their creation turned out. Even more disturbing is the implication that these beings retain consciousness even after being erased. When SpongeBob erases Doodlebob the first time, leaving only an arm, that arm continues to move and think independently. It sneaks around SpongeBob's house, uses the bathroom, and eventually redraws the entire body. This suggests that consciousness created by the pencil can't be truly destroyed, only transformed or relocated. The episode ends with the pencil being sent back to the surface world, where the artist immediately breaks it. Maybe the pencil's power is simply too dangerous for anyone to use responsibly. Even professional artists can't handle the ethical implications of creating conscious life. The French narrator jokes about the artist needing a pencil sharpener, but the real joke might be that some tools are too powerful for mortal beings to wield safely. The most disturbing thought is that every drawing they made and erased might still be conscious somewhere, trapped in whatever form they were left in. Each erasure could be considered a form of murder or imprisonment of a thinking being. SpongeBob and Patrick probably created dozens of conscious entities during their experiments, and most of them got destroyed without any consideration for their rights or feelings. The magic pencil represents power that nobody should have the ability to create life without understanding the responsibility that comes with it. SpongeBob and Patrick experiment with creating conscious beings while potentially traumatizing every entity they accidentally bring into existence. They're playing God without any moral framework or ethical guidelines. This raises serious questions about what makes someone real versus fake, and whether created consciousness has the same rights as naturally occurring life. Doodlebob's claim to be the real SpongeBob might actually have merit from a philosophical standpoint. After all, he thinks, feels, learns, and creates just like the original. Who's to say which version deserves to exist more? Up next is the SpongeBob kitchen sponge pollution theory. There's this wild theory that SpongeBob isn't actually a sea sponge at all. He's a kitchen sponge that represents human pollution, and Model Sponge basically proves this by showing how naturally he fits into his true role as a cleaning tool. SpongeBob's having a normal day cleaning the Krusty Krab when he overhears Mr. Krabs on the phone talking about letting the little guy go. SpongeBob immediately thinks Mr. Krabs is talking about firing him because he's shorter than Squidward. He starts measuring himself against Squidward and panicking about losing his job, but he completely misses the part where Mr. Krabs reveals he's actually talking about his pet scallop. SpongeBob gets so worked up that he quits and storms out, thinking he's been fired. He goes home crying and tells Gary he's lost everything. Patrick shows up to borrow SpongeBob's refrigerator and gives him advice about finding a new job by sitting around drinking drinkable sausage and watching TV. SpongeBob decides to look through job ads instead. SpongeBob tries a bunch of different jobs but fails at all of them. He works as a bank teller but keeps making the money into Krabby Patty shapes with his spatula. He tries being a carpenter but builds houses that look like hamburgers instead of actual houses. Every job he attempts, he can't help but do fry cook stuff because that's all he knows. Then SpongeBob sees a billboard advertising auditions for a sponge model and thinks this might be perfect for him. He and Patrick go to the TV station where SpongeBob auditions by singing terribly off-key. The casting director says he's horrible and has no talent, but gives him the part anyway because the role specifically calls for a real sponge. SpongeBob gets all excited thinking he's going to be a TV star. He puts on sunglasses, signs autographs, and tells reporters he's the new face of television. He goes home feeling like he's made it big and even snubs Mr. Krabs on the street, saying he won't forget the people who helped him on his way up. But when SpongeBob shows up for filming the next day, he discovers the horrible truth. The director has him stripped naked, and it turns out he is the product being advertised. SpongeBob gets used as an actual cleaning sponge to scrub dirty bathroom fixtures while Hans's hand moves him around. The commercial shows SpongeBob being used to clean sinks and showers while getting covered in grime and filth. He's screaming and groaning the whole time as he absorbs all the nasty stuff. The final straw comes when they try to use him to clean a toilet. SpongeBob refuses and quits on the spot, saying he's not cut out for acting. SpongeBob realizes he's actually a fry cook, and that's what he's always been. He runs back to the Krusty Krab and begs Mr. Krabs for his job back. Mr. Krabs is confused but agrees to rehire him with the condition that he also cleans the restaurant's toilets, which SpongeBob happily accepts. The episode ends with SpongeBob happily mopping toilets while Hans sits on one reading a newspaper, basically doing the exact same job he rejected at the TV station. What makes this theory so convincing is how perfectly SpongeBob fits into his role as a kitchen sponge. He doesn't need any training or instruction, he instinctively knows how to absorb liquids and scrub surfaces. The commercial doesn't require him to act because he is what they're advertising. He's literally the perfect kitchen sponge. The fact that SpongeBob gets cast specifically because he's a real sponge suggests there's something fundamentally different about him compared to other sea creatures. Real sea sponges don't look square and yellow like SpongeBob does. Kitchen sponges do. His entire appearance matches cleaning products that humans use, not natural ocean life. SpongeBob's square shape, yellow color, and porous texture are exactly what you'd expect from manufactured cleaning supplies. His holes aren't natural sponge pores, they're designed for maximum absorption like industrial sponges. His uniform brown pants even look like the rough scrubbing side of kitchen sponges. The theory suggests that SpongeBob represents human waste and pollution that's been dumped into the ocean. Instead of being a natural part of the underwater ecosystem, he's artificial trash that somehow gained consciousness. This would explain why he doesn't behave like other sea creatures, and why he's so obsessed with human activities like fry cooking. What's really disturbing is how naturally SpongeBob accepts being used as a cleaning tool. He only objects to cleaning the toilet because it's gross. When he goes back to the Krusty Krab, he happily accepts toilet cleaning as part of his job. He's basically returned to his original purpose as a cleaning implement. The episode shows that SpongeBob's true nature is to be a tool for cleaning up messes, which fits perfectly with the pollution theory. He's literally designed to absorb filth and grime, just like the kitchen sponges that humans throw away and replace. His entire existence is about cleaning up after others. This theory reframes SpongeBob's optimism as something artificial rather than natural. Kitchen sponges don't have feelings or personalities, but if pollution gained consciousness, it might try to be as positive as possible to make up for being unwanted trash. SpongeBob's desperate need to be useful and liked could be his programming as a cleaning tool. The most chilling part is that SpongeBob ends up right back where he started cleaning toilets and being treated like a disposable object. Even when he tries to escape his role as a cleaning implement, he gets pulled back into it. He can't escape what he really is, no matter how hard he tries to be something else. This theory suggests that SpongeBob's entire life in Bikini Bottom is just pollution, trying to integrate into the natural ecosystem. He works at a restaurant, lives in a house, has friends, but deep down, he's still just human waste that's contaminating the ocean environment. His presence represents how human pollution affects marine life in ways we don't fully understand. Moving forward, we have the Krusty Krab as a former military base theory. The Krusty Krab might actually be a converted Navy facility that Mr. Krabs repurposed after the war instead of building from scratch. The whole restaurant has this weird military vibe that goes way beyond just Mr. Krabs being an ex-sailor. Mr. Krabs is this former Navy guy who served in some kind of war and came back with serious military experience. In Shell of a Man, we see him with all his old Navy buddies who have these tough nicknames like Armor Abs Krabs and Torpedo Belly. These aren't just casual sailors, they're hardcore military veterans. The training video episode shows how obsessed Mr. Krabs is with military-style organization and discipline. When new employees watch that training film, it feels more like Navy boot camp than learning how to flip burgers. The narrator talks about emergency situations and watchful eyes like they're preparing for combat, not making fast food. The whole training process is super regimented and militaristic. They cover personal hygiene like soldiers getting ready for inspection, workstations like battle positions, and interfacing with your boss like following orders from a commanding officer. SpongeBob even starts barking orders at the kitchen equipment, telling potatoes to get to battle stations, and talking about port bow and setting sail. The Krusty Krab's physical design is really suspicious too. It looks like a lobster trap, but it's also shaped exactly like those big military storage containers you see on Navy ships. The whole building has this industrial, functional look that doesn't match other businesses in Bikini Bottom. Most places look organic or homey, but the Krusty Krab looks like it was built for storage and defense. When Plankton shows up to steal the formula, the whole place goes into lockdown mode with sirens and metal barriers. That's military-grade defense systems. Regular burger joints don't have automated blast doors and alarm systems that activate instantly when there's a threat. Mr. Krabs keeps calling SpongeBob Boy and Squidward Mr. Squidward, like he's still commanding troops. He runs the place with strict hierarchy and military discipline. Employees have to follow exact procedures, wear uniforms, and report for duty at specific times. That's how you run a military unit. The Krusty Krab training video is basically propaganda. It talks about the restaurant like it's some kind of important mission serving the greater good. The narrator uses words like dynasty and crown jewel and talks about employees being human resources that keep the operation afloat. That language comes from military thinking, not food service. When Mr. Krabs talks about getting the building, he says he bought a bankrupt retirement home and made minor alterations. But what if that retirement home was actually a Navy facility that got shut down after the war? Mr. Krabs could have bought surplus military property and converted it into a restaurant. The whole poop system sounds like military code. People order our patties is the kind of acronym that soldiers love using. Mr. Krabs probably adapted Navy communication systems for restaurant use because that's what he knows how to do. Everything has to have a code name or system. The way Mr. Krabs talks about the formula being stolen also sounds military. He treats the Krabby Patty recipe like classified information that enemies are trying to steal. In his mind, Plankton is an enemy operative trying to steal military secrets. SpongeBob's extreme loyalty and dedication make more sense if he's basically been brainwashed through military-style training. The way he talks about the Krusty Krab like it's his sacred duty to serve suggests he's been conditioned to think like a soldier following orders. He even salutes and says, "Aye, aye, sir," all the time. The restaurant's location between SpongeBob and Squidward's houses could be strategic positioning. If it was originally a Navy outpost, it would make sense to put it in a central location where it could monitor the surrounding area. Mr. Krabs might have chosen his employees based on how close they live to his old military base. All the weird equipment and advanced technology that Mr. Krabs shows off in the training video could be leftover Navy gear that he's repurposed for cooking. The automated money handling system and liquid transfer machines might actually be military equipment that he's using for restaurant purposes, because he already knew how to operate it. The fact that Mr. Krabs is so paranoid about security and constantly worried about theft suggests he's thinking like someone protecting a military installation, not running a normal business. He's got the mindset of a soldier guarding important assets, which makes sense if the building used to house actual military supplies. Look at how he reacts when there's any kind of emergency or threat. He immediately goes into command mode, starts barking orders, and treats everything like a military operation. Most restaurant owners would just call the police, but Mr. Krabs acts like he's defending a strategic outpost from enemy forces. The way the training video talks about Plankton as this constant threat also feels military. They don't just call him a competitor, they treat him like a foreign spy who's always trying to infiltrate their operation. That's the kind of thinking you get when you're used to actual warfare, where enemies really are trying to steal your secrets and sabotage your mission. Even the way Mr. Krabs hoards money makes more sense if you think about it as military supply management. In the Navy, you have to carefully track and protect all your resources because you might be cut off from resupply for months. Mr. Krabs probably learned to be super protective of assets during his military service. The next theory we have is that Mrs. Puff's boating school is really just a containment facility to stop SpongeBob from ever driving. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Mrs. Puff's boating school might actually be a containment facility designed to keep SpongeBob from ever getting his license and unleashing chaos on Bikini Bottom's roads. She's trying to make sure he never passes. SpongeBob has been taking driving lessons at Mrs. Puff's school for years and has failed his driving test dozens of times. In boating school, he mentions he's taken it 38 times already. In doing time, we see him still failing spectacularly, causing nuclear explosions and destroying entire buildings during his test. Mrs. Puff knows exactly what happens when SpongeBob gets behind the wheel. Every single test turns into a disaster movie with property damage, injuries, and complete mayhem. She's seen it happen over and over again, yet she keeps letting him come back to try again instead of just banning him permanently. During SpongeBob's driving tests, he consistently causes massive destruction. He crashes into lighthouses, destroys school buildings, creates nuclear explosions, drives through buildings, and causes multi-car pileups. In doing time, his driving rampage leads to him crashing into a retirement home and covering everyone in fruit punch, which gets Mrs. Puff arrested. Mrs. Puff is absolutely terrified every time SpongeBob gets in the driver's seat. She straps herself in tight, puts on protective gear, and basically prepares for war. She knows what's coming, but she lets it happen anyway. If she was really trying to help him pass, she would have changed her teaching methods after the first few disasters. After each catastrophic test, Mrs. Puff doesn't kick SpongeBob out of her school or refer him to another instructor. She just lets him sign up for another attempt. In doing time, when she ends up in jail because of his driving, she's actually happy because it means she doesn't have to deal with him anymore. That tells you everything about how she really feels. The weird part is that SpongeBob actually knows all the theory stuff perfectly. He can answer every question about driving rules, boat parts, and traffic laws without hesitation. The only time he fails is during the actual driving portion. Mrs. Puff could easily pass him on his written knowledge, but she insists on the driving test every time. Think about what would happen if SpongeBob actually got his license. He'd be legally allowed to drive anywhere in Bikini Bottom whenever he wanted. The level of destruction would be enormous. Every trip to the grocery store would turn into a citywide emergency. Mrs. Puff has seen the preview of this nightmare during every driving test. Mrs. Puff's school might be part of a larger system to protect Bikini Bottom from dangerous drivers. The government or some authority probably identified SpongeBob as a major threat and set up this fake school to keep him occupied. Mrs. Puff gets paid to babysit him and make sure he never actually passes. When SpongeBob tries to cheat in boating school by having Patrick give him all the answers through a radio, he's actually driving perfectly until he realizes he's cheating. The moment he admits he's cheating, he loses control and crashes. This suggests that SpongeBob could potentially drive well if he wasn't so anxious about the test, but Mrs. Puff makes sure he stays nervous and distracted. The fact that Mrs. Puff keeps detailed records of all his failures suggests she's documenting everything for someone else. Maybe she has to prove that SpongeBob is still too dangerous to get a license. Each failed test becomes evidence that the containment system is working. In doing time, when Mrs. Puff ends up in jail, she's genuinely happy because it means no more SpongeBob. She starts enjoying prison life, breaking rocks and making license plates, because even jail is better than dealing with SpongeBob's driving. That's not the reaction of someone who actually wants to help their students succeed. Mrs. Puff probably gets paid extra to keep SpongeBob enrolled. Normal driving instructors would have given up or banned him after the first few disasters, but she keeps taking his money and scheduling new tests. There has to be some financial reason beyond just regular tuition payments. The school's testing course is designed to maximize damage when SpongeBob inevitably crashes. There are lighthouses, buildings, and obstacles placed perfectly to create spectacular failures. If Mrs. Puff really wanted him to pass, she'd use a simple, safe practice area without all the hazards. SpongeBob's driving creates so much destruction that it becomes a public safety issue requiring police response. The authorities know about his driving problem, but they let Mrs. Puff handle it through her school system instead of just taking away his permit permanently. That suggests there's an official policy to keep him contained this way. The most damning evidence is that Mrs. Puff never tries different teaching methods. After dozens of failures, a real instructor would try new approaches, bring in specialists, or recommend that the student give up driving. Mrs. Puff just keeps doing the exact same thing that fails every time, which suggests failure is actually the goal. Look at how other students at the school actually pass their tests and get licenses. We see people celebrating getting their permits, but SpongeBob never gets close to passing. Mrs. Puff clearly knows how to teach driving successfully when she wants to, but she applies different standards to SpongeBob. The most telling moment comes when Mrs. Puff says she opened her school with a pledge to never give up on a student who's willing to learn. But then SpongeBob shows up and she immediately regrets that promise. She knows from day one that she's stuck in an impossible situation where she has to keep teaching him but can never let him pass. Mrs. Puff's mental breakdown throughout the series makes more sense if you think about the psychological stress of running a fake school. She has to pretend to teach while actually sabotaging her student, all while enduring repeated traumatic crashes. The guilt and pressure of maintaining this lie would drive anyone crazy. The police always arrest Mrs. Puff instead of SpongeBob when crashes happen, even though he's clearly the one causing all the problems. This suggests the authorities understand that Mrs. Puff is responsible for containing SpongeBob, and when she fails at that job, she gets punished for it. SpongeBob's complete lack of improvement over hundreds of attempts is statistically impossible, unless something is actively preventing him from learning. Most people would accidentally get better at driving after that much practice, but SpongeBob stays at exactly the same skill level. Mrs. Puff must be doing something to keep his abilities from improving. The fact that SpongeBob can operate complex machinery at the Krusty Krab, ride a unicycle, and coordinate his body for jellyfishing proves he has the motor skills needed for driving. His failures are specifically limited to driving tests, which suggests Mrs. Puff has found a way to trigger his anxiety only in that situation. When Mrs. Puff fantasizes about life without SpongeBob in doing time, she lists all the normal stresses of running a real driving school. But those problems pale in comparison to dealing with SpongeBob's destructive driving. The only way her life makes sense is if she's being compensated for this special containment duty. The system works perfectly from the authorities' perspective. SpongeBob thinks he's getting real driving lessons, so he doesn't get suspicious or try alternative ways to get a license. Mrs. Puff takes all the blame when things go wrong, protecting whoever set up this arrangement, and the public stays safe because SpongeBob never actually gets licensed to drive unsupervised. Now here's another one. Bikini Bottom might actually exist in a dimension where physics constantly flip between reality and cartoon logic. Bikini Bottom might exist in a dimension where the laws of physics randomly switch between normal Earth rules and cartoon logic, creating a world where reality itself is completely messed up. The evidence for this comes from characters drowning underwater, fires burning in the ocean, and impossible beach physics that suggest the town sits on some kind of dimensional fault line. Look, the world of Bikini Bottom presents itself as this normal underwater city, where sea creatures live regular lives, but the physics make absolutely no sense if you actually think about it. These characters are already underwater, yet they can somehow drown. Beaches exist with liquid water, and fire burns like it's no big deal. Something way weirder is happening here than just cartoon nonsense. Throughout all these early episodes, we keep seeing the same impossible stuff over and over. In Tea at the Tree Dome, SpongeBob and Patrick nearly die from not having water even though they're sea creatures. In Ripped Pants, there's this whole beach thing at Goo Lagoon with surfing and swimming, which is nuts if everything is already underwater. When SpongeBob visits Sandy's air-filled dome, things get really weird really fast. As soon as all the water drains out, SpongeBob starts dying. His body shrivels up like a raisin, he can barely move, and he's clearly suffocating without water to breathe. But hold on, he's a sea sponge. Shouldn't he be fine in air? The guy literally starts gasping and wheezing like he's drowning, except he's drowning in air instead of water. His flowers wilt, his body gets all wrinkly, and he's desperately trying to get to any source of moisture he can find. At one point, he's so dehydrated he tries to drink from Sandy's bird bath, which makes the bird punch him in the face. When Patrick shows up, the exact same thing happens to him. Both characters start dying because there's no water in the air environment. Patrick even screams, "There's no water in here!" like it's this shocking revelation. But dude, you guys live underwater already. Why would being in air be deadly? Here's where it gets really backwards. Sandy needs her air helmet to breathe underwater, but SpongeBob and Patrick need water to breathe in air. So Sandy needs air to survive in water, while the fish need water to survive in air. The physics are completely flipped around and make zero sense for an underwater city. The weirdest part is how SpongeBob keeps lying about loving air. He tells Sandy, "Air is my middle name, and I love air, air is good," while he's literally dying from breathing it. He's trying so hard to impress her that he's willing to suffocate rather than admit he needs water. In Muscle Bob Buff Pants, we get this whole beach scene at Goo Lagoon that breaks every rule of underwater physics. Characters are lifting weights, playing volleyball, and getting sunburned. Wait, sunburned underwater? How does that even work? One fish actually complains about forgetting sunscreen and shows off his bright red sunburn. Sunlight can't penetrate deep enough into the ocean to cause burns. And if these characters are really underwater, there shouldn't be direct sunlight hitting them. Yet the show treats this like it's totally normal. The beach setup is completely insane when you think about it. There's sand, there are beach chairs, people are sunbathing underwater. Larry the Lobster is acting like a lifeguard at an underwater beach, which makes no sense because everyone should already know how to swim since they live in water. Characters are surfing on waves that somehow exist inside the ocean. They're swimming in pools of water while already being underwater. It's like there are different types of water existing in the same space, which is physically impossible according to any known science. In Ripped Pants, the surfing gets even more ridiculous. Characters are riding waves just like at a real beach, but if they're already underwater, what are these waves made of? The sports announcer talks about surf conditions in the ocean, which is like talking about rain conditions inside a swimming pool. SpongeBob falls off his surfboard and gets washed up on the beach, even though he's already in the ocean. How do you wash up on a beach that's underwater? The whole scene plays out like a normal beach rescue, except everyone involved should already be in their natural water environment. The fire examples will blow your mind. In Karate Choppers, SpongeBob and Sandy are chopping up food for sandwiches and using what looks like hot sauce that actually steams and burns. There are actual flames and heat effects happening underwater, which should be impossible. Throughout the series, characters use campfires, light candles, and cook with stoves that have real fire. In some episodes, there are explosive fires that burn just like they would on land. Fire needs oxygen to burn, and underwater environments don't have the right conditions for combustion, but somehow it works fine in Bikini Bottom. What really messes with your head is how inconsistent all this stuff is. Sometimes characters act like they're truly underwater, with fish swimming around and ocean currents affecting their movement. Other times, they walk around normally, like they're on dry land with regular gravity. Sometimes SpongeBob can absorb water like a real sponge, but other times he acts like water is this separate thing he needs to drink. Sometimes characters float around like they're weightless in water, other times they fall down like gravity works exactly the same as on land. This inconsistency is the key to understanding what's really happening. The physics aren't following one set of rules. They're constantly shifting between different states of reality, sometimes following underwater rules and sometimes following surface world rules. Think about what could cause this kind of dimensional instability. Bikini Bottom is located in the Pacific Ocean, which was ground zero for massive nuclear bomb testing during the 1940s and 50s. The real Bikini Atoll was literally blown up by hydrogen bombs that were thousands of times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Japan. These nuclear explosions were so powerful they vaporized entire islands and created massive craters in the ocean floor. If bombs that strong can destroy matter itself, what's to stop them from damaging the fabric of reality? Maybe these explosions tore holes in space and time, creating pockets where normal physics don't apply. Bikini Bottom could be sitting right on top of one of these dimensional damage zones. The nuclear testing might have created an area where reality constantly shifts between different states, sometimes following surface world physics and sometimes following underwater physics. This would explain why Sandy needs her air helmet. As a surface creature, she's locked into surface world physics and can't adapt when reality shifts to underwater mode. Her helmet provides a stable air environment that doesn't change when the dimensional physics around her start going crazy. The shifting physics might also explain why characters make such weird decisions sometimes. If reality is constantly changing around them, they might not always know which set of physics rules are currently active. SpongeBob might think he can breathe air because reality was in surface mode 5 minutes ago, but then it shifts to underwater mode and suddenly he's suffocating. What's really disturbing is that the residents probably don't even realize they're living in a dimensionally messed up area. To them, the shifting physics would just seem like normal life. They've grown up in a world where fire sometimes burns underwater and you sometimes need air to breathe, so they don't question it. But living in this kind of unstable reality has to be taking a toll on everyone. The constant changes in the basic rules of existence would be incredibly stressful, even if you don't consciously realize what's happening. Characters might be developing psychological problems from never knowing if the world is going to follow normal rules from 1 minute to the next. SpongeBob's extreme optimism and ability to bounce back from anything might actually be a defense mechanism against living in unstable reality. When the world around you can change without warning, maybe the only way to stay sane is to just roll with whatever happens and never question why things don't make sense. Patrick's complete lack of intelligence might also be a side effect of dimensional exposure. If your brain is constantly trying to process reality that keeps changing its rules, maybe it just gives up trying to make sense of anything. Patrick's stupidity could be brain damage from living in unstable physics. The most terrifying possibility is that this dimensional instability is spreading. Nuclear testing damaged the fabric of reality in this specific area, but that damage might be expanding outward like cracks in a windshield. Bikini Bottom could be ground zero for a reality collapse that's slowly affecting larger areas of the ocean. Other underwater communities might start experiencing the same physics problems as the dimensional damage spreads. Fish in other parts of the ocean might suddenly find themselves needing air to breathe or dealing with underwater fires that shouldn't exist. The cheerful, colorful appearance of Bikini Bottom might be hiding the fact that it's actually a disaster zone where human weapons testing broke the fundamental laws of nature. The residents are living in a nuclear testing aftermath area, where reality itself has been permanently damaged, and they don't even know it. This explains why Bikini Bottom feels so isolated from the rest of the ocean world. It's not just a quirky underwater town, it's a pocket of damaged reality that exists separately from the normal underwater environment. The dimensional instability keeps it cut off from areas where physics still work properly. The scariest part is wondering what happens when the dimensional damage finally spreads beyond Bikini Bottom's borders. Will the entire ocean eventually become a place where reality randomly shifts between different states? Could this kind of physics instability eventually reach the surface world and start affecting human civilization? Maybe Bikini Bottom is just the beginning of a much larger dimensional catastrophe that started with nuclear testing and is slowly spreading throughout the ocean. The residents might be the first victims of a reality breakdown that could eventually consume the entire planet. On to the next theory, we have Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob stumbling into a federal surveillance operation disguised as a health inspection. The Nasty Patty episode might reveal the darkest government conspiracy in SpongeBob history, where Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob accidentally uncover a federal surveillance operation disguised as a routine health inspection. The episode starts on a dark, stormy night when a health inspector arrives at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs immediately panics because he knows one health violation could shut down his restaurant forever. He tells SpongeBob to clean everything and change his underwear because this inspection could ruin their entire business. The health inspector orders one of everything on the menu, which makes Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob think this is their chance to impress him. They stuff his mouth with every single item: crusty kelp dogs, buttered barnacles, powdered driftwood, fresh sludge pudding, diet red tide, and fried flotsam. The inspector eats everything and says he just needs to try a plain Krabby Patty to finish his inspection. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs start celebrating because they think they're about to pass. But then a news bulletin comes on TV warning everyone about a fake health inspector who's been scamming restaurants for free food. Mr. Krabs realizes they've been duped and gets absolutely furious about giving away free food to a con man. This is where things get really suspicious. Mr. Krabs decides to get revenge by making a nasty patty, a disgusting burger with volcano sauce, seahorse radish, toenail clippings, and they even drop it in the toilet and dry it with gym socks. They're both wearing clothespins on their noses because it smells so bad. When the fake inspector tries to eat the nasty patty, a fly gets stuck in his throat and he starts choking. He slips on condiment packets and bangs his head on the table, knocking himself unconscious. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs are laughing and think the poison patty killed him. But here's where the conspiracy gets really obvious. Another news bulletin immediately comes on saying the fake inspector has been captured and shows his picture. The guy in the picture looks nothing like the inspector at the Krusty Krab. The news says if a health inspector comes to your restaurant and he's not the guy in the picture, then he's real. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs realize they just poisoned a real health inspector and panic. They drag his unconscious body to a muddy hill to bury him. While SpongeBob is digging the grave, he accidentally hits the inspector with a rock, knocking him out again just as he was waking up. Two police officers suddenly show up with flashlights and catch them red-handed with shovels and a buried body. But instead of arresting them for obvious criminal activity, the cops just want Krabby Patties. They give Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob a ride back to the restaurant, while the inspector's body slides down the hill in the rain. The inspector ends up in the police car trunk with the muddy shovel. At the restaurant, SpongeBob tries to hide the body in a giant hat while the cops are inside eating. When one officer goes to get ice from the freezer, Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob completely break down and confess everything. Mr. Krabs screams that SpongeBob killed the health inspector and they buried him and stuffed his body in the freezer. But when the officer opens the freezer, it's completely empty. The inspector has vanished without a trace. Then the inspector walks in perfectly fine, just wanting to give them their passing grade. The cops immediately attack him with an anchor and a barrel, calling him a zombie. But after beating him up, they realize he's just an ordinary health inspector and everything goes back to normal. The most suspicious part is how quickly everything gets covered up. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs openly admit to attempted murder in front of two police officers, but there are zero consequences. The inspector doesn't press charges, doesn't report the poisoning attempt, and doesn't even seem bothered that they tried to bury him alive. Think about how weird the timing is. The fake inspector news bulletin comes on at the exact moment they need to know the truth. The police show up right when they're burying the body, but only want food instead of investigating the obvious crime scene. The inspector mysteriously recovers from severe head trauma and toxic poisoning with no medical treatment. The theory suggests this whole thing was a setup to test Mr. Krabs' loyalty and criminal tendencies. The health inspector was actually an undercover federal agent monitoring the Krusty Krab's operations. The government has been watching Mr. Krabs because his restaurant makes suspicious amounts of money for a small burger joint. The fake inspector news story was deliberately timed to see how Mr. Krabs would react to being scammed. When he immediately decided to poison someone over free food, it confirmed the government's suspicions about his violent tendencies and willingness to commit murder for money. The police officers were part of the operation, which is why they didn't arrest anyone despite witnessing a confession to murder. The whole thing was designed to gather evidence about Mr. Krabs' criminal mindset while giving him plausible deniability through the misunderstanding cover story. The inspector's miraculous recovery and lack of legal consequences prove this was all planned. No real person could survive being poisoned, beaten with rocks, buried alive, and attacked with weapons without serious medical intervention. The fact that he just walks it off and hands out a passing grade shows this was his job all along. The episode ends with the French narrator calling everyone idiots, which might be a hint that viewers are supposed to see through the obvious cover-up story. The government successfully tested Mr. Krabs' criminal tendencies, confirmed he's willing to commit murder for money, and gathered evidence while maintaining the illusion that it was all just a big misunderstanding. This theory explains why so many weird coincidences happen at the perfect time to save Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob. The timing of the news bulletins, the police showing up for food instead of investigating crimes, and the inspector's superhuman recovery all make sense if this was a planned government operation rather than random events. The scariest part is that Mr. Krabs passed the real test. The government now knows he's dangerous enough to poison customers and dispose of bodies when his business is threatened. This information could be used against him later or to justify more intensive surveillance of his operations. The Krusty Krab might be under constant federal monitoring now, with agents disguised as customers, health inspectors, and even employees. Every random inspection or visitor could actually be part of an ongoing investigation into Mr. Krabs' criminal activities and suspicious wealth. Sandy's whole setup in Bikini Bottom might actually be part of a big science experiment where she's the test subject, not the scientist. Her tree dome could be a fancy lab where researchers study what happens when you isolate someone really smart from their own kind. Think about Sandy's rocket ship for a second. She's got this amazing spacecraft in her backyard that can fly to the moon and back like it's nothing. In Sandy's rocket, she talks about going to space like it's a quick trip to the store. Normal scientists don't just have billion-dollar space technology sitting around. That stuff has to come from somewhere, with serious money and resources. Sandy acts really weird about the rocket, too. She keeps telling SpongeBob, "This is science, and I don't have time for fun and games," like she's following some strict rules, instead of just having her own research project. When SpongeBob asks about aliens, she shuts him down immediately, saying there are no aliens because she's been to the moon. But how would one trip to the moon prove anything about aliens in the whole universe? It sounds like someone told her exactly what to say. When SpongeBob accidentally launches them into space, Sandy doesn't panic at all. Most people would freak out if their expensive rocket got hijacked, but Sandy stays calm because she knows the ship will bring them home safely. She's used to this technology because someone else gave it to her and trained her how to use it. The really dark stuff comes in Texas when Sandy has this complete breakdown about missing home. She cries so hard she fills her helmet with tears and has to drain it out. She's singing about missing wide open spaces while living in a tiny glass bubble. This is someone cracking under serious psychological pressure. Sandy actually tries to leave Bikini Bottom in that episode. She packs her bags and gets on a bus to go back to Texas. But wait, how does a bus from an underwater city get to Texas? That makes no sense unless there's some special transportation system set up just for her. When SpongeBob and Patrick make jokes about Texas, Sandy goes absolutely crazy and chases them with a lasso. Normal homesickness doesn't make you that violent. Her extreme reaction suggests her connection to Texas has been artificially cranked up to make the experiment work better. Right when Sandy's about to escape, SpongeBob and Patrick throw her this elaborate Texas-themed party. They somehow got cowboy hats, barbecue stuff, and Texas decorations really fast. Either they had help from people with serious resources, or this whole emotional crisis was planned to test how attached Sandy is to her new life. Sandy decides to stay after the party, saying, "Home is where you're surrounded by critters that care about you." But this sounds like someone talking herself into accepting a bad situation rather than actually being happy. Her Tridome becomes really sinister when you think about it as a controlled environment. She needs special equipment to survive outside it, making her completely dependent on whoever maintains her air supply. If some organization wanted to keep her trapped while studying her, the dome would be the perfect prison disguised as a home. Sandy has all this advanced technology but stays in one small town studying the same fish every day. Someone with her skills and resources should be exploring space or working at major universities. Instead, she's stuck in Bikini Bottom making inventions that nobody else ever sees. The experiment is probably testing what happens when you isolate really smart people from their own kind. Sandy gets to hang out with SpongeBob and Patrick, but they're so different from her that she stays fundamentally alone. It's like putting a genius in a room full of friendly kids and seeing how long they can stay sane. Her friends have no idea they're part of this experiment. SpongeBob thinks he's just hanging out with his neighbor, but really, he's providing social interaction for a test subject, while researchers somewhere monitor how Sandy responds to different kinds of stress and friendship. The scariest part is Sandy might not even know she's being experimented on. She could think she chose to come to Bikini Bottom for research. The advanced technology gets explained as research grants, hiding the fact that she's actually a prisoner in a psychological study. Every time Sandy shows signs of wanting to leave, something happens to make her stay. Her breakdown gets fixed by a friendship party. That's way too convenient to be coincidence. It's like the researchers have a playbook for keeping their test subject happy enough to stick around. Sandy's scientific work doesn't make sense either. What exactly is she studying? She never publishes papers or reports her findings to anyone. Real marine biologists have to share their research. Sandy just builds gadgets and hangs out with talking fish. The organization running this probably picked Bikini Bottom because talking sea creatures are the perfect test environment. Sandy gets social interaction but stays culturally isolated. It's the ultimate psychology experiment disguised as a marine research station. Sandy thinks she's living her dream as an independent scientist, but really she's trapped in a controlled environment where every friendship and every breakdown gets monitored and analyzed. She's been convinced that her prison is actually freedom, and she's so isolated she doesn't even know what she's missing. The researchers have created the perfect long-term experiment. Their test subject willingly keeps herself locked up while providing endless data about how smart people adapt to being alone. And Sandy will probably never figure out that her entire life in Bikini Bottom is just someone else's science project. Next up is SpongeBob's hidden genius theory. If you're enjoying our theories so far, subscribe to the channel. SpongeBob might actually be a musical genius and natural leader who acts childish on purpose to avoid responsibility and high expectations. When things get really serious, his true abilities come out and he becomes capable of amazing stuff that nobody would expect from the goofy fry cook. Most of the time, SpongeBob acts like this innocent, simple guy who gets excited about everything. He works flipping burgers, lives in a pineapple, and seems to think everything is wonderful. But what if this is all fake to hide how smart he really is? Look at how SpongeBob acts in crisis situations. Normally, he's happy to follow orders and let other people make decisions. But when things get really bad, he suddenly becomes this confident leader who knows exactly what to do. When Squidward first starts his marching band, SpongeBob is just another eager guy asking dumb questions like, "Is this the part where we start kicking?" He seems genuinely confused about basic band stuff and acts like he doesn't know the difference between a marching band and a chorus line. During the early practice sessions, SpongeBob blends in with all the other terrible musicians. He doesn't stand out as being good or bad at his instrument. He just follows along with everyone else, making the same mistakes and looking just as confused as Patrick and the others. But everything changes the moment Squidward gives up on them. As soon as Squidward storms out and says the whole thing is hopeless, SpongeBob immediately becomes a completely different person. He doesn't panic or quit like you'd expect from someone who's supposed to be simple. Instead, SpongeBob steps up and gives this really smart motivational speech. He talks about what kind of monsters they are for failing Squidward when he needed them. He reminds everyone how Squidward has always been there for them, even when it was just convenient for him. When the other band members point out that firemen and doctors actually saved them in his examples, SpongeBob doesn't get confused. He smoothly changes his argument, telling them to pretend Squidward was a fireman so they can figure out what it truly means to be in a marching band. This isn't the kind of speech you'd expect from someone who thinks mayonnaise might be an instrument. SpongeBob suddenly sounds like someone who really knows how to lead people and understands psychology. He's using smart tricks to get everyone motivated. After his speech works and everyone gets pumped up, SpongeBob takes charge of their final practice. He counts them in with a 1, a 2, a skiddly diddly do, showing that he actually knows musical timing and how to conduct a band. Nobody taught him this stuff, he just naturally knows how to lead. The biggest shock happens during the actual performance. When they get to the Bubble Bowl, SpongeBob becomes the lead singer for their rock show. He's belting out this professional level rock song with perfect pitch and timing. The vocals are so good they needed a real professional rock singer to do the voice. This means SpongeBob's singing voice is at a totally different level than his normal talking voice. He went from asking silly questions about instruments to delivering a stadium-quality rock performance. During the whole Sweet Victory show, SpongeBob is clearly the star. He's commanding the stage, hitting every note perfectly, and leading the entire band through this complex song. This is not how someone who's genuinely simple acts. What makes this even weirder is that Squidward, who's supposed to be the music expert, is completely shocked by how good they sound. He throws away his conductor stick and just stares in amazement. The student became better than the teacher, and the teacher has no idea how it happened. The band's sudden change from terrible to amazing happens exactly when SpongeBob takes over. When Squidward was in charge, they were a disaster. The moment SpongeBob steps up and takes control, they become good enough to perform at a major sporting event. This pattern of hidden abilities shows up in other episodes too. SpongeBob can master complex cooking, create amazing art, and solve problems that stump everyone else. But he always acts like everything was just luck or accident. The theory explains why SpongeBob is so happy about simple tasks. If you're smart enough to excel at anything, but you choose to find joy in basic work, that actually shows incredible wisdom. Most smart people get bored or frustrated with easy jobs, but SpongeBob has found a way to be genuinely happy doing simple stuff. SpongeBob's decision to hide his abilities makes sense when you think about the pressure that comes with being known as gifted. If people knew how smart and talented he really was, they'd expect him to take on leadership roles, solve everyone's problems, and constantly prove himself. By acting simple, he gets to live a stress-free life. The eager face that Squidward mentions during the Bubble Bowl might actually be SpongeBob's excitement at finally getting to use his real talents. He's been hiding his musical abilities for so long that when he finally gets a chance to shine, he can't contain his excitement. This also explains why SpongeBob is so loyal to his friends even when they treat him badly. Someone with his smarts and abilities could easily find better friends and more important jobs. But he chooses to stick with Squidward and Patrick because he genuinely cares about them. SpongeBob might be using his people skills to understand exactly what his friends need from him. With Squidward, he provides constant optimism to balance out the negativity. With Patrick, he provides gentle guidance disguised as fun games. He's managing everyone's emotions while pretending to be clueless. The most impressive part is how well SpongeBob maintains his act. Even when he's showing incredible abilities, he always makes sure attention doesn't stay on him. After the amazing Bubble Bowl performance, he doesn't brag or take credit, he just goes back to his normal happy self. SpongeBob has created the perfect life for himself. He gets to use his talents when it really matters, like helping his friends or rising to big challenges. But the rest of the time, he gets to enjoy simple stuff without any pressure or expectations. He's found a way to be both really gifted and genuinely happy. The scary thing is wondering what would happen if SpongeBob ever decided to stop hiding his abilities. If he really is this much of a genius, he could probably take over Bikini Bottom if he wanted to. The fact that he chooses to flip burgers and catch jellyfish instead shows incredible self-control. Maybe SpongeBob knows that with great power comes great responsibility, and he's deliberately choosing a simpler path. He's smart enough to know that using his full potential would change his relationships and his life completely, so he only shows his true abilities when absolutely necessary. The Band Geeks episode might be one of the rare times when the situation was important enough for SpongeBob to drop his act completely. Squidward's happiness was at stake, and SpongeBob cared enough to risk exposing his true nature to save his friend's reputation. What's really smart is that even after showing his incredible musical and leadership abilities, SpongeBob goes right back to his normal behavior in the next episode. He doesn't let the success go to his head or start acting superior. He just returns to his normal act like nothing happened. This means SpongeBob has incredible self-discipline and long-term thinking. He's playing a character so well that even his closest friends don't realize how smart he really is. That takes an incredible amount of mental effort that most people couldn't keep up. The theory makes SpongeBob a much more interesting character. Instead of being a simple-minded optimist, he becomes this incredibly wise person who's chosen happiness and friendship over fame and power. He's deliberately choosing to see the good in everything because that's how he wants to live. SpongeBob is a master manipulator who's so good at what he does that nobody realizes they're being manipulated. He's created this perfect persona that lets him help people without them feeling inferior or dependent on him. The most brilliant part is that SpongeBob's fake personality is actually based on real qualities he has. He really is optimistic, loyal, and caring. But he's amplified these traits to an almost cartoonish level to hide his more intimidating qualities like his intelligence and natural leadership ability. When you watch Band Geeks with this theory in mind, the whole episode becomes this masterclass in hidden leadership. SpongeBob waits until the exact right moment to reveal his abilities, motivates the group perfectly, takes command without seeming bossy, and then immediately goes back to his cover story. The fact that he can switch between these two personalities so seamlessly suggests he's been practicing this act for years. This isn't something that just happened randomly. SpongeBob has deliberately crafted this persona and maintained it consistently across every aspect of his life. What's really wild is that if this theory is true, then SpongeBob is probably the smartest character in the entire show. He's outsmarted everyone, including the audience, by convincing us all that he's just a simple, happy guy when he's actually a strategic genius playing the longest con in cartoon history. Up next, we've got a spooky Squidward theory. Squidward might have some kind of psychic ability that made him sense Nosferatu hanging around the Krusty Krab, but his logical brain couldn't handle it. So he makes up the hash-slinging slasher story, which is actually his subconscious trying to warn him about the real vampire threat messing with their restaurant. When Squidward starts working the night shift, something feels weird to him right away. He's annoyed about staying late, but there's this creepy feeling that goes beyond just being tired. His mind starts picking up on supernatural stuff that he can't figure out. Instead of realizing there's actually a vampire hanging around their workplace, Squidward's logical brain tries to make sense of these weird feelings by creating a fake story. But the story he makes up has scary, accurate details about the real supernatural threat they're dealing with. Squidward talks about the hash-slinging slasher as someone who used to be a fry cook and mentions supernatural revenge against the restaurant. This matches the fact that a real supernatural creature is actually targeting the Krusty Krab during their night hours when they're vulnerable. The timing of when Squidward decides to tell this scary story is really suspicious. He doesn't start talking about ghost stories during the day or when things are normal. He only brings up the hash-slinging slasher after they've been working nights, and he started feeling that weird supernatural presence. Nosferatu has probably been lurking around the Krusty Krab for a while, but he only gets active during the night shift when the restaurant is empty and there are fewer people around. Vampires are more active at night anyway, so it makes sense he'd start messing with them once they stayed open late. The fact that Nosferatu is flickering the lights shows he's trying to create fear and chaos. He's end-timing the light flickering to match up with Squidward's scary story to make it as frightening as possible. All the scary stuff that Squidward mentions in his fake story ends up happening exactly like he said it would. The lights flicker, the phone rings with nobody there, and a mysterious guy appears at exactly the right time. Even though there are normal explanations for some of this stuff, the fact that it all happens in the exact order Squidward described means supernatural manipulation is going on. The phone call where nobody answers is really suspicious. Richard says he called earlier but hung up because he was nervous. But what are the chances he would call at the exact moment that fits Squidward's scary story? Nosferatu might have messed with the timing of that call to create maximum fear. The mysterious figure showing up is even more planned out. Richard appears at the perfect scary moment, with perfect lighting to make him look creepy, carrying a spatula that matches Squidward's story. The whole thing feels too convenient to be just coincidence. Nosferatu could have been controlling events all night to create this perfect storm of scary coincidences. He makes the lights flicker at just the right moments, influences when the phone call happens, and maybe even guides Richard to show up when he'll look the most frightening. Squidward's psychic ability explains why he was able to create such an accurate, scary story. His subconscious was picking up on the real supernatural threat, but since he's a logical person who doesn't believe in vampires, his brain turned those psychic feelings into a fictional ghost story. The hash-slinging slasher legend is basically Squidward's mind trying to process and warn him about Nosferatu being there. The details about a former employee wanting revenge, supernatural powers, and nighttime attacks are all accurate descriptions of what they're actually dealing with. What makes this even cooler is that Squidward's fake story almost works like protection. By talking about the supernatural threat out loud, even as fiction, he's acknowledging it exists on some level. This might actually limit Nosferatu's power or make him less dangerous. Nosferatu shows himself at the end because his cover got blown. Once Squidward and SpongeBob start realizing that supernatural events are really happening, the vampire can't keep his hidden influence going anymore. He has to reveal himself because they've become aware he's there. The casual way everyone reacts to seeing Nosferatu means this isn't the first time supernatural stuff has happened in Bikini Bottom. They're not shocked that a vampire exists, just surprised to find out he was the one causing their problems that night. This theory explains why Squidward was so confident telling his story. He was channeling real psychic information about an actual threat. His subconscious knew exactly what kind of danger they were facing, even if his conscious mind didn't understand where that knowledge came from. The fact that SpongeBob gets so scared by the story means he might have some psychic sensitivity too. He's picking up on the same supernatural energy that Squidward is sensing, which is why the fictional story feels so real and terrifying to him. Nosferatu's reason for targeting the Krusty Krab makes sense when you think about vampire psychology. Restaurants are places where people gather to eat stuff, which is similar to how vampires consume blood. He might be drawn to eating places as a way to find victims or just because the energy feels familiar. The night shift creates the perfect hunting environment for a vampire. Fewer witnesses, isolated location, tired workers. Nosferatu probably saw the 24-hour thing as a chance to set up a regular feeding territory. What's really creepy is that if Nosferatu hadn't shown himself at the end, they might never have known what was really happening. He could have kept manipulating events and creating fear forever while staying hidden behind coincidences and normal explanations. The theory suggests that Squidward actually has a useful psychic gift that could protect him and others from supernatural threats. But because he doesn't understand or believe in his own abilities, he can't use them well. He's getting accurate supernatural information but dismissing it as imagination. If Squidward learned to trust his psychic instincts instead of trying to explain them away logically, he might be able to detect other supernatural threats before they become dangerous. His mind is already picking up on this stuff. He just needs to take it seriously. The whole episode becomes way more sinister when you realize there was a real supernatural predator stalking them all night. What seemed like a fun, scary story was actually a psychic warning about real danger. Squidward's subconscious was trying to prepare them for genuine threat that his logical mind couldn't accept. This also makes you wonder what other supernatural creatures might be lurking around Bikini Bottom. If there's a vampire casually hanging out at restaurants, what other monsters are hiding in plain sight? Squidward's psychic abilities might be the key to detecting and avoiding these hidden dangers. The most disturbing part is wondering what Nosferatu was planning to do if he hadn't been caught. Was he just playing pranks? Or was he building up to something more dangerous? The fact that he's a vampire suggests his end goal probably involved feeding on someone. The really scary thing is that Nosferatu seems comfortable and familiar with the restaurant. He knows where the light switch is, he knows the phone system, and he's timing everything perfectly. This suggests he's been watching and studying the Krusty Krab for a while, learning their routines and preparing for whatever he had planned. Next, there's a theory about SpongeBob's social struggles. SpongeBob might have serious social learning disabilities that make him unable to recognize when people are lying to him or taking advantage of him. This would explain why he's so trusting of everyone, can't learn from bad experiences, and keeps making the same social mistakes over and over again throughout the series. In Chocolate with Nuts, SpongeBob shows clear signs of not being able to process social information correctly. When the same guy keeps selling them different bags using the exact same sales tactics, SpongeBob can't recognize the pattern. A normal person would realize after the second or third scam that this guy is ripping them off, but SpongeBob just keeps buying more stuff from him. The way SpongeBob handles the bag salesman is really telling. The guy literally uses the same approach every time, telling them they need special equipment to be real salesmen, but SpongeBob falls for it repeatedly. Even when Patrick points out that it's the same guy, SpongeBob doesn't seem to understand what that means or why it's important. SpongeBob also shows problems with understanding cause and effect in social situations. When their chocolate sales keep failing, he can't figure out why people don't want to buy from them. He tries random solutions like being nice or stretching the truth without understanding the actual reasons their approach isn't working. When they decide to make the customer feel special, SpongeBob follows the advice literally without understanding the psychology behind it. He tells Patrick to flatter people, but he doesn't grasp the concept of reading social cues or adapting to different personalities. He just mechanically applies the same approach to everyone. The lying progression shows how SpongeBob mimics behaviors without understanding them. When Patrick suggests they stretch the truth, SpongeBob doesn't understand strategic dishonesty. He just starts making up increasingly ridiculous claims like, "You'll rule the world," because he thinks bigger lies must be better, which shows he can't process the logic of deception. SpongeBob's reaction to the fake injury scam is particularly revealing. When the guy in cast tells his sob story about glass bones and paper skin, SpongeBob immediately believes every word and wants to help him. He can't detect the obvious manipulation, even when the story is clearly designed to make them feel sorry for him. This pattern of extreme gullibility shows up throughout the entire series. SpongeBob consistently trusts people who are obviously lying to him or using him. He believes Squidward when he tells ridiculous stories, falls for Plankton's schemes, and gets taken advantage of by random characters who show up with obvious scams. SpongeBob's problems with social learning also explain why he doesn't understand Squidward's behavior. After years of Squidward being mean to him, rejecting his friendship, and clearly showing annoyance, SpongeBob still thinks they're best friends. A person with normal social processing would pick up on these cues and adjust their behavior, but SpongeBob can't read the social information correctly. His literal interpretation of social advice shows up in other episodes too. When someone tells him to be himself or try harder, he follows these instructions mechanically without understanding what they actually mean in context. He can't grasp abstract social concepts and needs everything spelled out in concrete terms. SpongeBob's inability to learn from repeated negative experiences is another sign of social learning problems. Normal people would eventually realize that certain approaches don't work and try something different, but SpongeBob keeps using the same failed strategies over and over again. The way SpongeBob processes emotional information is also problematic. He often misreads people's emotions or motivations completely. When someone is obviously angry or frustrated with him, he interprets it as playfulness or friendship. He can't distinguish between genuine kindness and manipulation. SpongeBob's extreme optimism might actually be a coping mechanism for his social learning disabilities. If you can't accurately read social situations or understand when people are being mean to you, maybe the safest approach is to assume everyone is nice and everything will work out okay. His childlike behavior could be another adaptation to his disabilities. If you can't process complex social information, staying in a simple, childlike mindset might make the world more manageable. People expect less sophisticated social skills from someone who acts like a kid. SpongeBob's job at the Krusty Krab makes sense in this context because it's a structured environment with clear rules and expectations. He can excel at cooking because it's a concrete skill with measurable results, unlike the abstract world of social interaction where he constantly struggles. His relationship with Gary also fits this theory. Gary doesn't require complex social interaction or communication, so SpongeBob can have a successful relationship with his pet even while struggling with human social situations. The fact that SpongeBob never seems to get better at reading social cues, despite years of experience, suggests it appears to be a genuine processing difference that affects how he interprets social information. SpongeBob's extreme loyalty to people who treat him badly might stem from his inability to recognize when relationships are unhealthy. He doesn't understand the social cues that would tell most people to distance themselves from toxic individuals. His tendency to take everything literally also shows up in how he interprets instructions or advice. In Chocolate with Nuts, when they decide to focus on selling, Patrick starts staring intensely at the customer because he's focusing. SpongeBob doesn't correct this because he probably interprets instructions the same literal way. The theory explains why SpongeBob is so successful in some areas but completely hopeless in others. He can master concrete skills like cooking, driving boats in video games, or artistic projects, but he fails consistently at anything requiring social intelligence or the ability to read between the lines. SpongeBob's social learning disabilities would also explain why he's so drawn to simple, rule-based activities like jellyfishing or bubble blowing. These hobbies have clear, predictable patterns that don't require complex social navigation or interpretation of hidden meanings. This theory makes SpongeBob's character more consistent across the series. Instead of being randomly naive or selectively intelligent, he becomes someone with specific cognitive differences that affect his social processing while leaving other abilities intact. His struggles are the result of genuine differences in how his brain processes social information. The most important aspect of this theory is that it explains SpongeBob's persistent optimism and kindness, despite constantly being taken advantage of. If you can't accurately detect when people are being cruel or manipulative, you might naturally default to assuming the best about everyone, which creates a genuinely sweet personality even in difficult circumstances. Up next is a darker theory about SpongeBob's friendship with Squidward, but don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In Can You Spare a Dime?, there's this really dark theory that SpongeBob isn't actually being helpful when he takes care of homeless Squidward. He might be unconsciously sabotaging Squidward's independence because he needs to feel needed and wants to control their friendship. So here's what happens in the episode. Squidward quits his job after Mr. Krabs accuses him of stealing a dime. He ends up homeless and broke, begging for spare change on the street. When SpongeBob finds him, instead of letting Squidward face the natural consequences of his choices, SpongeBob immediately swoops in to rescue him. But here's where it gets weird. SpongeBob gives Squidward his own bed, sleeps on the couch himself, and starts treating Squidward like absolute royalty. We're talking full servant treatment with massages, hand-feeding grapes, acupuncture, head polishing, the whole 9 yards. This is creating a situation where being homeless is actually way better than having a job. Why would Squidward ever want to work again when he's living like a king for free? The really telling part is how SpongeBob reacts when Gary tries to point out that Squidward is obviously taking advantage of him. Instead of listening to his pet's concerns, SpongeBob gets all defensive and insists that Squidward would never take advantage of him. He's refusing to see what's happening right in front of his face. But SpongeBob totally knows what's going on. When he makes alphabet soup that spells "get a job," he's showing that he understands the problem but won't deal with it directly. Then he creates this whole puppet show about lazy people who mooch off their friends, hoping Squidward will get the hint. This passive-aggressive approach actually makes everything worse because it lets SpongeBob feel like he's addressing the issue without actually confronting it. He gets to be the martyr who's suffering in silence while still maintaining control over the situation. SpongeBob waits months until he's completely exhausted before finally snapping. But think about the timing here. If he really wanted to help Squidward, he would have set boundaries early when it could have motivated some positive changes. Instead, he waits until the situation is so bad that his explosion looks like a mental breakdown rather than helpful feedback. Even when SpongeBob finally loses it, he doesn't talk to Squidward about their relationship or set any boundaries. He goes straight to Mr. Krabs to fix the job situation instead of dealing with the personal stuff. He's solving the surface problem while totally avoiding the deeper issues about how they treat each other. The most damning evidence comes at the very end. When SpongeBob sees that Squidward and Mr. Krabs are starting to argue again, he immediately puts his maid costume back on. He's already getting ready for the whole cycle to repeat itself, which means this probably isn't the first time something like this has happened. SpongeBob's extreme helpfulness might actually be a sneaky form of emotional manipulation. By making himself totally essential to people who are struggling, he creates relationships where he holds all the power. Squidward becomes completely dependent on SpongeBob's generosity, which means SpongeBob gets to feel superior and needed all the time. This pattern probably shows up everywhere in SpongeBob's life. His friendship with Patrick involves constantly rescuing Patrick from his own dumb decisions. His relationship with Gary is all about taking care of Gary's needs without expecting anything back. SpongeBob surrounds himself with people who depend on him instead of having actual equal friendships. The scary thing is, SpongeBob probably doesn't even realize he's doing this. He genuinely thinks he's being kind and helpful. But his help consistently creates more problems than it solves because it stops people from learning how to handle their own stuff. SpongeBob's enabling behavior actually hurts Squidward instead of helping him. Squidward spends months living like a king instead of building job skills or getting his confidence back. When he finally goes back to work, he hasn't learned anything from being homeless because SpongeBob protected him from all the consequences. The whole situation could have been fixed in like a week if SpongeBob had just offered normal support with clear boundaries. Something like, "You can crash here while you look for work, but you gotta help with chores and show me you're actually trying to find a job." Instead, he created this weird master-servant thing that didn't help anybody. SpongeBob's need to be needed probably comes from his own insecurities. By making himself essential to other people's survival, he guarantees they can't reject him or abandon him. It's a way of forcing loyalty and affection, but it's based on dependency instead of real friendship. The months of exhaustion might actually be part of what SpongeBob enjoys about the whole thing. Suffering for other people makes him feel virtuous and important. The harder he works to take care of Squidward, the more he gets to think of himself as this amazing friend and good person. This explains why SpongeBob is always getting involved in everyone else's problems, even when nobody asks for his help. He's actively looking for chances to make himself indispensable. Every crisis becomes an opportunity for SpongeBob to swoop in and save the day. SpongeBob's enabling might be why so many characters in Bikini Bottom have the same problems over and over again. Instead of learning from their mistakes and growing up, they just wait for SpongeBob to fix everything for them. This creates a whole town full of people who never really mature or develop independence. The puppet show reveals how much SpongeBob thinks about this whole dynamic. He's clearly spent time analyzing what's wrong with the situation, but he won't take any real action. This suggests he's torn between wanting to help and wanting to keep the power balance that makes him feel important. SpongeBob's angry explosion shows how much resentment builds up when you're enabling someone. He claims to be helping out of love and friendship, but the fury when he finally snaps reveals how much he was actually sacrificing and how pissed off he was about it. Healthy helping doesn't create that level of rage and exhaustion. The most messed up part is how SpongeBob immediately gets ready for the pattern to start over again. He doesn't think about what went wrong or try to set better boundaries for next time. He just prepares to enable the next crisis, which means this is like a compulsive behavior rather than a conscious choice to be helpful. Next up, we've got a theory about SpongeBob's superhuman stomach. In Dying for Pie, there's this crazy theory that SpongeBob might have some kind of superhuman stomach that makes him immune to poison and deadly stuff. The proof is pretty wild when you look at it. So here's what goes down in the episode. It's Employee Brotherhood Day, and Squidward has to get SpongeBob a gift. He's being super lazy about it and just wants to buy something quick. He sees these pirates selling pies and buys one for $25 without really listening to what they're saying. But get this, the pirates straight up tell him these pies are bombs. They say the pies were made in a factory, a bomb factory, they're bombs. When Squidward looks disappointed, they quickly say they were just kidding about all that bomb stuff, but they totally weren't kidding. SpongeBob finds the pie in Mr. Krabs' office and eats the whole thing while Squidward and Mr. Krabs are outside talking. When they come back and see what happened, Mr. Krabs completely loses it because he knows exactly what those pies can do. Mr. Krabs says he's seen this before and that he's watched bomb pie deaths 11 times as a matter of fact. So these bomb pies are a real thing that actually kill people all the time. Mr. Krabs has literally watched 11 other people die from eating the exact same type of pie that SpongeBob just ate. But SpongeBob doesn't die. He doesn't even get sick. He spends the whole day doing fun stuff with Squidward, totally clueless that he's supposed to be dead. The pie should have blown up in his stomach and killed him instantly, but nothing happens. The really weird part comes when SpongeBob talks about feeling something drop into my lower intestine and says it smells like cherry, or maybe grape, blueberry. So the bomb pie is still sitting inside his body, moving through his digestive system like normal food. He can actually smell it, which means it's still giving off those explosive chemicals that should be killing him. At the end, SpongeBob reveals he never actually ate the pie. He saved it in his pocket to share with Squidward later. When he trips and the pie hits Squidward's face, it explodes and destroys the entire town. So yeah, the pie was definitely a real bomb the whole time. But wait, this creates a huge problem with the story. If SpongeBob never ate the pie, then what was moving through his stomach? What was he smelling in his intestines? The episode clearly shows him feeling the pie inside his body, but then says he still had the pie in his pocket. The only way this makes sense is if SpongeBob actually did eat a bomb pie at some point, but his stomach handled it just fine. Maybe he ate part of it and saved part of it. Or maybe this wasn't his first bomb pie. Either way, SpongeBob has definitely eaten explosive stuff without any problems. Look at other episodes where SpongeBob survives impossible things. In I Had an Accident, he gets his butt completely blown up and needs surgery, but heals perfectly. In other episodes, he gets ripped in half, exploded, and torn apart, but always bounces back like nothing happened. SpongeBob's digestive powers might be the secret to why he's basically indestructible. If his stomach can safely handle literal bombs, then his whole internal system probably works differently than normal sea creatures. He might be able to eat absolutely anything without getting hurt. Think about what this means for SpongeBob's biology. Normal stomachs use acid to break down food, but SpongeBob's stomach might use some weird process that neutralizes dangerous chemicals instead of just dissolving them. His digestive system could be like a biological recycling plant that can handle any kind of toxic waste. This would explain why SpongeBob is always so happy to eat weird stuff. In different episodes, he eats things that would make other characters sick, but he never has any problems. If his stomach can handle bombs, then expired food, weird chemicals, and gross stuff would be no big deal for him. The bomb pie thing also makes you wonder what else SpongeBob has survived eating. If Mr. Krabs has seen 11 people die from bomb pies, but SpongeBob can eat them safely, then maybe SpongeBob has been accidentally eating deadly food his whole life without knowing it. This theory also explains why SpongeBob is so different from other sea creatures in Bikini Bottom. Most fish have normal digestive systems that can be poisoned or damaged by toxic stuff. But SpongeBob works like he's from a completely different species with super advanced biological protection. The digestive immunity might be connected to SpongeBob's sponge biology. Real sea sponges filter water and particles through their bodies, cleaning out toxins and pollution. Maybe SpongeBob's stomach works the same way, filtering out dangerous chemicals instead of getting hurt by them. What's really scary is thinking about what SpongeBob could potentially eat. If bombs don't hurt him, then he could probably eat industrial waste, poison, radioactive material, or any other deadly stuff without any problems. He might be completely immune to biological and chemical warfare. This makes you wonder about SpongeBob's origins. How did he get these superhuman digestive abilities? Was he born this way, or did someone modify him somehow? Maybe he's some kind of engineered creature designed to survive in toxic environments. The Bomb Pie episode might be showing us just a tiny bit of SpongeBob's true abilities. If he can process explosives safely, then his digestive system might be the most advanced biological defense system ever created. He could eat his way through any chemical attack and come out totally fine. SpongeBob's happy ignorance about his own abilities makes this even more creepy. He has no clue that he just survived something that has killed 11 other people. He treats eating a bomb like it's the same as eating a normal pie, so he's been unconsciously using these powers his whole life. The most disturbing possibility is that someone knows about SpongeBob's digestive immunity and might be using him as a test subject. The fact that bomb pies are being sold regularly in Bikini Bottom means someone is running ongoing experiments to see who can survive eating them. SpongeBob might be the perfect subject for testing biological weapons or toxic substances because he can eat anything without dying. His job at the Krusty Krab could be a cover for these experiments, with dangerous ingredients being secretly added to his food to test his limits. So SpongeBob is potentially the most biologically advanced creature in Bikini Bottom. His digestive system represents technology or evolution that's way beyond what anyone else has, making him either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous to whoever knows his secret. Up next is a theory about Squidward's dark time loop. Squidward's whole time travel mess is way darker than it looks. He's stuck in this twisted cycle where he keeps screwing himself over without even knowing it. So Squidward's hiding from SpongeBob and Patrick because they want to go jellyfishing. He gets himself frozen for 2,000 years, wakes up in robot future, hates it, and decides to go back to prehistoric times to escape SpongeBob completely. Smart plan, right? Wrong. When he gets to caveman times, he meets these primitive versions of SpongeBob and Patrick who are basically just dumb animals. They're terrified of jellyfish and keep getting stung because they don't know how to catch them. Squidward watches these idiots hurt themselves and gets annoyed. Here's the messed up part. Squidward grabs their animal skin clothes, turns them into nets, and teaches caveman SpongeBob how to catch jellyfish properly. He literally invents jellyfishing and shows them the whole technique. He's standing there going, "It's called jellyfishing," like he's some great teacher. But wait a minute. Squidward just created the exact thing he was running away from. He hates jellyfishing in modern times, but he's the guy who taught it to SpongeBob's ancestors in the first place. His attempt to escape jellyfishing led him to accidentally invent jellyfishing. That's completely insane. This means every single time SpongeBob bugs him about going jellyfishing, Squidward is dealing with consequences of his own actions. He taught primitive SpongeBob this activity, which got passed down through generations, which means modern SpongeBob learned it because Squidward created it thousands of years ago. The time machine won't bring him home until he admits he misses SpongeBob. It's like the universe is forcing him to take responsibility for creating his own problems, even though he has no memory of doing it. The machine basically holds him hostage until he accepts that his situation is his own fault. Think about how cruel this is. Squidward spends his whole life complaining about SpongeBob's jellyfishing obsession, but he's the one who started the whole thing. He's been whining about something he invented. Every annoying jellyfishing trip, every time SpongeBob wakes him up early to catch jellyfish, every moment of frustration, all of it traces back to Squidward's decision to teach cavemen how to do it. When he breaks the time machine and ends up in that white void, it shows what happens when you try to run away from everything. The voices keep saying "alone" over and over, which is what Squidward thinks he wants. But the experience makes him go crazy because being completely alone is actually horrible. The scary thing is wondering how many times this loop has happened. Maybe Squidward has been through this cycle dozens of times. He gets fed up, tries to escape, ends up in the past, teaches jellyfishing to primitive SpongeBob, returns to the present, forgets what happened, and starts the whole cycle again when he gets annoyed enough. This explains why Squidward can never successfully avoid SpongeBob or find peace. He's fighting against his own past decisions that he doesn't remember making. Every problem in his life stems from choices he made while trying to solve previous problems. The prehistoric SpongeBob and Patrick are happy when he teaches them jellyfishing. They think it's this amazing new skill. Squidward feels good about helping these primitive creatures become smarter, but he's actually dooming himself to thousands of years of annoyance. What makes this theory really disturbing is that it might apply to real life too. How many of our current problems come from past decisions we've forgotten about? How often do we try to escape situations that we created through our own choices? Maybe we're all trapped in smaller versions of Squidward's time loop, dealing with consequences we don't remember causing. The episode ends with SpongeBob and Patrick laughing when Squidward says he invented jellyfishing. They think it's a funny joke, but it's actually this tragic moment where Squidward realizes he's been complaining about something he created. He's the architect of his own suffering, trapped in a prison he built without knowing it. Squidward's time travel adventure shows that running away from your problems doesn't solve them. It often makes them worse in ways you can't predict. When you try to escape responsibility for your current situation, you might end up creating the exact problems you're trying to avoid, just in a different time period. The most twisted part is that Squidward probably learned nothing from this experience. He says he's going back to the freezer at the end, which means he's ready to repeat the whole cycle again. He hasn't figured out that his problems are self-created, so he'll keep making the same mistakes that trap him in this loop forever. Next up is a theory about SpongeBob being the real menace of Bikini Bottom. Before we get into that, subscribe to our channel. SpongeBob causes more damage to Bikini Bottom than any villain in the show, and he does it all while thinking he's helping people. In Hall Monitor, he destroys half the city, terrorizes innocent families, and gets himself labeled as a dangerous criminal, all because he wanted to be useful. When SpongeBob sees the broken traffic light, he doesn't call the proper authorities or put up warning signs. He decides to direct traffic himself using wild hand gestures and a whistle. The result is a massive car pileup that leaves people injured and screaming. After causing this disaster, SpongeBob actually congratulates himself, saying, "What would this town do without you, SpongeBob?" He feels proud of creating chaos that hurt innocent people. The couple eating dinner at home becomes SpongeBob's next target. He notices their window is open and decides this makes them susceptible to danger. Instead of knocking on their door to politely mention the security risk, SpongeBob puts on a ski mask and jumps through their window screaming, "I'm the open window maniac!" He terrorizes these people in their own home, then tells them he hopes they learned a valuable lesson as they run away in terror. These aren't random accidents or moments of bad luck. SpongeBob actively chooses the most disruptive and dangerous way to handle every situation. He could solve problems quietly and efficiently, but that wouldn't give him the attention and validation he desperately needs. Every helpful action is really about making himself feel important and necessary. The pattern shows up constantly throughout the series. SpongeBob helps Squidward by destroying his art classes, ruining his performances, and wrecking his house. He protects people by putting them in dangerous situations that require his rescue. He takes care of Gary by forcing the snail into stressful activities he clearly hates. Every time, SpongeBob genuinely believes he's being helpful while actually making everything worse. What makes this behavior so disturbing is that SpongeBob never learns from his mistakes. Each episode resets and he goes right back to causing destruction while believing he's saving the day. This suggests his need to interfere isn't accidental but compulsive. He literally cannot stop himself from butting into other people's business because that's how he validates his own existence. SpongeBob's psychology reveals someone who can't handle the idea that others might be fine without his help. He needs to feel essential and superior, so he creates problems that require his intervention. The broken traffic light wasn't really causing major issues until SpongeBob got involved. The couple with the open window was eating dinner peacefully until he decided to teach them about security by traumatizing them. His victims often end up worse off than when he found them. In Hall Monitor, Patrick starts the episode happy and relaxed, eating ice cream on a wall. After SpongeBob recruits him as a deputy, Patrick becomes terrified and paranoid, crying about wanting to go home and begging SpongeBob to save him from imaginary threats. SpongeBob literally destroyed Patrick's peace of mind for no reason. The most twisted part is how SpongeBob manipulates people into depending on him. Patrick completely abandons his own judgment and follows SpongeBob's increasingly panicked instructions over the walkie-talkie. SpongeBob guides Patrick through a series of hiding spots, creating artificial drama and danger where none existed. Patrick stops thinking for himself and becomes totally reliant on SpongeBob's expertise. Mrs. Puff understands SpongeBob's pattern better than anyone, which explains why she's so reluctant to give him any authority. She knows he'll take whatever responsibility he's given and expand it way beyond appropriate limits. When she finally makes him hall monitor, she immediately regrets the decision because she's watched SpongeBob turn simple tasks into citywide disasters before. The newspaper's reaction to SpongeBob's chaos reveals another layer to his destructive impact. His actions are so bizarre and senseless that they can't be understood through normal logic. The media labels him a maniac because his behavior doesn't fit typical patterns of criminal activity. How do you explain someone who causes massive destruction while genuinely trying to help? Regular villains like Plankton are actually less dangerous than SpongeBob because their motives are predictable. You can plan for greed, jealousy, or revenge. But SpongeBob's chaotic helpfulness is impossible to anticipate or prevent. He might decide to help you at any moment, and there's no way to know what form that help will take or how much damage it will cause. The police in the episode demonstrate how law enforcement struggles with SpongeBob's unique brand of destruction. They're looking for someone with malicious intent, but SpongeBob's crimes stem from misguided good intentions. His motivations are so twisted that even he doesn't understand why everything he touches turns into a disaster. SpongeBob's complete lack of self-awareness makes him impossible to reason with or redirect. He genuinely believes he's always helping, no matter how much evidence suggests otherwise. When people run away from him screaming, he interprets their fear as gratitude. When buildings collapse and people get injured, he assumes it's all part of some greater good he's accomplishing. The episode shows how SpongeBob's disasters create ripple effects that hurt innocent people who weren't even involved in his original help. Mrs. Puff ends up in jail because she gave him the hall monitor uniform. The couple he terrorized probably developed anxiety about home security. The people injured in the traffic accident had to deal with medical bills and trauma. SpongeBob's need to help creates casualties far beyond his immediate victims. Patrick's role in the episode reveals how SpongeBob spreads his dysfunction to others. Patrick starts as a normal person enjoying his ice cream, but SpongeBob quickly transforms him into a paranoid deputy who can't distinguish between reality and fantasy. By the end, Patrick is screaming in terror at wanted posters and begging SpongeBob to save him from threats that don't exist. The way SpongeBob handles Patrick's ice cream crime shows his twisted sense of justice. Patrick accidentally dropped some ice cream, which SpongeBob treats as vandalism requiring punishment. Instead of just telling Patrick to clean up after himself, SpongeBob makes him feel guilty and recruits him into dangerous police work. A simple mess becomes grounds for turning someone into an accessory to major crimes. SpongeBob's behavior in this episode reflects a pattern seen in toxic people who use helpfulness as a form of control. They create problems, then position themselves as the only solution. They make others dependent on their assistance, then get frustrated when that assistance inevitably fails. They never accept responsibility for the chaos they cause because they're convinced their intentions were pure. The most chilling aspect of SpongeBob's character is that he represents how some of the worst damage gets done by people who think they're doing good. Malicious people can be stopped once you identify them as threats. But people like SpongeBob are nearly impossible to stop because they're convinced they're heroes. They'll keep causing destruction forever because in their minds, they're always saving the day. The episode ends with SpongeBob confessing to being the maniac, but even then he doesn't understand what he did wrong. He's just finally connecting the dots between his actions and the wanted poster. He'll probably go right back to causing disasters in the next episode because he hasn't learned anything about why his help is actually harmful. This theory explains why so many characters in Bikini Bottom have ongoing problems that never get resolved despite SpongeBob's constant interference. His assistance prevents them from developing their own solutions or learning to handle challenges independently. Instead of helping people grow and improve, SpongeBob keeps them stuck in cycles of dependency and chaos that serve his need to feel important and necessary. Speaking of SpongeBob, let's move to the SpongeBob purgatory test theory. SpongeBob's whole life might be a giant test to see if he can stay kind and patient no matter what gets thrown at him. In Rock Bottom, he gets stuck in this creepy underground town where everything seems designed to stop him from getting home. But he only escapes when he stops trying to control everything and lets some weird creature help him. The whole Rock Bottom thing looks like it was set up just to mess with SpongeBob. Every single time he gets close to catching a bus, something stops him. His balloon smacks the driver, his shoes come untied, he gets hungry for candy. It's like someone's watching him and making sure he can't succeed until he learns the right lesson. SpongeBob tries all these crazy schemes to catch the buses. He disguises himself as a bench, makes cardboard copies of himself, waits in this insanely long line, but none of his smart plans work. He only gets home when he gives up trying to be clever and just tells this creature named Bert that he needs help. Bert immediately gives him a balloon that floats him back to Bikini Bottom. This same pattern happens everywhere else in the show. SpongeBob faces challenges that seem specifically designed to test different parts of his personality. His driving tests with misses, Puff test whether he can stay calm when he's nervous. He knows all the driving rules perfectly, but crashes every time because he panics and tries too hard. Think about how weird the driving situation really is. SpongeBob has failed that test hundreds of times over years. Normal people would either eventually pass through practice or just give up. But SpongeBob keeps coming back and keeps failing in exactly the same ways. It's like the test isn't really about driving, it's about something else entirely. His job at the Krusty Krab tests his work attitude. SpongeBob deals with impossible customers who are actively mean to him, equipment that breaks constantly, and situations that would make most people quit. But he stays happy and keeps doing good work no matter what happens. The challenges seem designed to see how much he can handle before he breaks. Squidward is basically a walking patience test. He's mean to SpongeBob every single day, rejects all his friendship attempts, and tries to ruin his fun whenever possible. Any normal person would eventually give up on such a hostile neighbor, but SpongeBob never stops trying to be friends with him, no matter how badly Squidward treats him. The Squidward thing gets really obvious in episodes where SpongeBob could easily get revenge or just abandon him when he's in trouble. Instead, SpongeBob always helps Squidward even after being treated like garbage. It's like he's being tested to see if he can stay kind to people who don't deserve it. Patrick tests SpongeBob's loyalty as a friend. Patrick constantly gets SpongeBob into trouble with dumb ideas, acts selfish, and sometimes even steals from him. A smart person would distance themselves from such a problematic friend. But SpongeBob never gives up on Patrick no matter how much damage he causes. The Patrick relationship includes some really extreme situations. Patrick has nearly gotten SpongeBob killed, destroyed his stuff, and embarrassed him in front of everyone. But SpongeBob keeps treating him like his best friend. That level of forgiveness goes way beyond normal friendship. What makes this theory really interesting is that SpongeBob passes these tests by just being himself. He doesn't figure out that he's being tested and then fake the right answers. His natural kindness and optimism just happen to be exactly what the tests are looking for. He succeeds through authenticity, not strategy. Other characters might be part of the testing system without knowing it. They stay exactly the same throughout the series. Squidward always grumpy, Patrick always dumb, Mr. Krabs always greedy. They never grow or change because their job is to provide consistent challenges for SpongeBob, not to develop as people themselves. The episodes always reset SpongeBob back to his starting point, ready to face similar challenges again. He doesn't build up lasting relationships, wealth, or trauma that would change how future tests work. This keeps the testing conditions consistent across unlimited episodes. Rock Bottom specifically teaches lessons about asking for help and dealing with cultural differences. SpongeBob struggles at first because the creatures there speak differently and have weird customs. He succeeds when he stops focusing on the differences and connects with Bert's basic helpfulness. The episode shows that genuine kindness can cross any cultural barrier. The really dark part of this theory is wondering if SpongeBob has any real choices. If his whole life is predetermined tests with scripted outcomes, then maybe he's trapped in this system without even knowing it. He might be stuck in some kind of moral education program disguised as normal life. But there's a more hopeful way to look at it. Maybe everyone faces similar character tests disguised as random life events. The difference is most people don't respond like SpongeBob does. His success comes from treating every challenge as a chance to practice being good, rather than seeing obstacles as unfair punishments. The balloon escape from Rock Bottom is pretty symbolic. SpongeBob literally rises above his problems when he shows the right character traits. This suggests the testing system might offer real rewards for people who learn its lessons, not just endless repetition. Mrs. Puff, Mr. Krabs, Sandy, and Gary all present different types of challenges. Mrs. Puff tests his ability to handle pressure, Mr. Krabs tests his work ethics and honesty, Sandy tests his ability to respect people who are smarter than him, and Gary tests his responsibility as a caretaker. Each relationship examines a different aspect of his character. The most twisted thing is that SpongeBob might be the only one actually being tested. Everyone else could be actors playing roles designed to challenge him. Their job is to stay in character and present him with specific moral dilemmas, not to grow as people themselves. SpongeBob's endless optimism makes more sense if you think of it as a survival strategy for passing character tests. Getting angry or giving up would mean failing the tests and possibly facing worse consequences. Staying positive and kind becomes the smart way to handle whatever the universe throws at him. The testing system seems to get harder over time. Early episodes involve basic kindness and work performance. Later episodes introduce more complex situations involving sacrifice, forgiveness, and choosing between different good options. As SpongeBob masters simple virtues, he faces more sophisticated moral challenges. What's really beautiful about this theory is that SpongeBob usually passes his tests by being genuinely good rather than trying to game the system. In Rock Bottom, he doesn't realize that accepting help is the key to escaping. He just gets tired of struggling alone and honestly tells Bert about his problem. That authentic vulnerability is what allows Bert to help him. The theory suggests that SpongeBob's approach to life, responding to every situation with kindness and optimism, might be the secret to passing whatever tests existence throws at us. Whether he's in purgatory or just living in a world that rewards good character, his strategy of staying true to his values regardless of circumstances seems to work pretty well. Here's the next theory. Squidward might be his own biggest obstacle to happiness. Squidward might be his own worst enemy, constantly destroying opportunities for happiness before they can actually make his life better. In Squid's Day Off, he gets exactly what he always says: he wants a paid day off with zero responsibilities, but immediately starts creating imaginary problems that ruin the whole experience. The episode shows Squidward getting handed a perfect situation. Mr. Krabs is gone, he's in charge, and there are no customers to deal with. He could spend the entire day relaxing at home while getting paid for it. But instead of enjoying this gift, Squidward starts worrying about what SpongeBob might be doing wrong at the restaurant. His anxiety spirals completely out of control. He imagines SpongeBob giving away all the money to Patrick, then pictures the restaurant catching fire. These aren't realistic concerns based on actual evidence. They're paranoid fantasies his brain creates to justify going back to check on things. Every time he tries to relax, his mind invents new disasters that require his attention. The hallucinations get progressively worse throughout the day. Squidward sees SpongeBob's reflection in his mirror telling him to destroy the Krusty Krab. He spots SpongeBob's silhouette behind his shower curtain, which turns out to be toilet paper and shampoo bottles. He thinks SpongeBob is hiding in his bathtub drain and chases this imaginary version through the pipes. By the end, Squidward is running naked through town, completely detached from reality, chasing problems that never existed. He's created an entire day of misery for himself when he could have been peacefully sunbathing in his backyard. The final twist reveals that they forgot to flip the close sign to open, meaning no customers would have come anyway. All his anxiety was completely pointless. This pattern shows up everywhere else in the series. Squidward consistently gets opportunities for success, recognition, or happiness, but finds ways to mess them up through his own negative attitude and self-defeating behaviors. In art episodes, Squidward often gets chances to showcase his talents or gain recognition from important people, but his ego, jealousy, and need to show off usually sabotage these opportunities. Instead of being grateful for the chance and doing his best work, he gets competitive with SpongeBob or tries too hard to impress people, which backfires. When Squidward gets breaks from SpongeBob's annoying behavior, he often ends up missing the chaos or accidentally creating situations that bring it back. He complains constantly about SpongeBob bothering him, but when SpongeBob actually leaves him alone, Squidward becomes bored and restless. His relationships follow the same pattern. Squidward could have genuine friendships with his neighbors or coworkers, but he pushes people away with his attitude before they can get close. He acts superior and dismissive toward others, then wonders why he feels lonely and isolated. The self-sabotage seems to stem from Squidward's deep belief that he doesn't deserve good things. His pessimistic worldview becomes a defense mechanism. If he expects everything to go wrong, he can't be disappointed when it does. But this also prevents him from recognizing or enjoying genuinely good situations when they happen. Squidward's negative thought patterns create self-fulfilling prophecies. He assumes SpongeBob will mess up at work, so he hovers and micromanages, which creates stress and tension that wouldn't exist otherwise. He expects people to reject his art, so he approaches showcases with desperation and ego rather than confidence, which makes his work less appealing. The most tragic part is how Squidward actively chooses to maintain his misery. He could quit his job, move away from SpongeBob, or pursue his artistic dreams more seriously. But he stays in situations that make him unhappy because they're familiar and predictable. Change involves risk, and Squidward would rather stick with guaranteed unhappiness than risk potential disappointment. His anxiety in Squid's Day Off shows how his mind works when left to its own devices. Without external structure or problems to focus on, his brain immediately starts manufacturing crises. He literally cannot sit still and enjoy peace because he's trained himself to always expect disaster. The hallucinations reveal how disconnected Squidward can become from reality when his negative thinking spirals out of control. He's so convinced that something must be going wrong that he starts seeing evidence everywhere, even when it doesn't exist. His paranoia becomes stronger than his ability to process what's actually happening. Squidward's breakdown also shows his deep need for control. He can't delegate responsibility to SpongeBob for even a few hours without panicking. This is because Squidward can't handle not being in charge of every detail. His need to micromanage everything prevents him from ever truly relaxing. The running naked through town represents how far Squidward's self-sabotage can go. He's so focused on imaginary problems that he loses touch with basic social awareness and self-care. His obsession with controlling situations he can't actually control makes him behave in ways that create real problems. What makes this theory particularly sad is that Squidward's self-sabotage often hurts other people too. His negative attitude affects his coworkers, his paranoia creates unnecessary drama, and his refusal to accept happiness makes him take his frustrations out on innocent bystanders. The closed sign revelation at the end shows how often Squidward's problems are entirely self-created. He spent an entire day in agony over a situation that was never actually problematic. If he had just looked at the sign or asked SpongeBob a simple question, he could have avoided all the anxiety and enjoyed his day off. This pattern suggests that many of Squidward's daily frustrations might be similarly unnecessary. His complaints about customers, co-workers, and neighbors might stem more from his own negative mindset than from actual problems in his environment. He's trained himself to focus on what's wrong rather than what's going right. The theory explains why Squidward stays trapped in unsatisfying situations despite having options for change. His self-sabotage is about maintaining a familiar state of controlled misery rather than risking the unknown possibilities that come with actually trying to be happy. Squidward's day off could have been a turning point where he learned to relax and trust others. Instead, it became another example of how his own mind is his biggest obstacle to contentment. He's actively participating in creating his own unhappiness through his choices and thought patterns. The most disturbing aspect is that Squidward seems almost addicted to his own misery. When genuine peace and happiness are offered to him on a silver platter, he immediately starts stirring up drama and anxiety to return to his familiar state of stress. It's like he's more comfortable being miserable than risking the vulnerability that comes with allowing himself to be genuinely happy. On to the next theory. Bikini Bottom might run on completely made-up social rules, but before we break that down, subscribe to our channel. Bikini Bottom might operate on completely made-up social rules that anyone can create or change just by acting confident enough about them. In Opposite Day, Squidward literally invents a fake holiday on the spot, and everyone immediately believes it's real without asking any questions. When Squidward tells SpongeBob about Opposite Day, SpongeBob doesn't wonder if this holiday actually exists or ask for proof. He just accepts it and starts following the rules right away. Patrick claims he's heard of it, but then admits he has no idea what it is, which means he's just pretending to know about something that sounds official. This shows that you can basically create new reality in Bikini Bottom just by speaking with authority. Squidward makes up an entire holiday with specific rules. Normally loud people should be quiet. Normally boring people should be silly. Everyone gets to act different. SpongeBob and Patrick immediately start restructuring their whole day around these completely fabricated guidelines. The really weird part is how quickly and completely they commit to this made-up system. SpongeBob starts talking backwards, eating from Gary's bowl, and eventually decides he needs to become Squidward to be properly opposite. Patrick goes along with everything and starts claiming to be Squidward too. They're not just playing a game, they're genuinely trying to follow the rules of a holiday that was invented 5 minutes earlier. This pattern shows up constantly throughout the series. Characters create new clubs, games, trends, and social rules all the time, and everyone else just goes along with them. The Pretty Patties craze happens because SpongeBob decides to make colored burgers. Jellyfish racing becomes popular because someone suggests it. Entire social movements start and stop based on whatever random idea someone announces with enough enthusiasm. Think about how many episodes involve the whole town suddenly obsessing over some new thing that didn't exist before. Someone announces a new activity or product, and within hours the entire population is participating like it's been a tradition forever. There's no skepticism, no gradual adoption period, no cultural resistance to change. The town doesn't seem to have any stable institutions or long-term cultural memory. There's no consistent government, no established laws that everyone knows about, no religious or educational systems that provide continuity. Social reality just shifts around based on whoever speaks up most confidently in any given situation. In Opposite Day, when the real estate agent shows up, she encounters multiple people claiming to be Squidward. Instead of thinking this is weird behavior, she gets angry like this is a personal insult to her intelligence. She doesn't question whether multiple Squidwards could exist or wonder if something strange is happening in this town. She just gets mad that people are confusing her and storms off. This suggests that even visitors to Bikini Bottom expect the social rules to be arbitrary and changeable. The real estate agent doesn't try to figure out which person is actually Squidward or ask for identification. She just assumes everyone is lying to her and gives up on the whole situation. Gary joining in by putting a pickle on his face and pretending to be Squidward shows how far this reality bending goes. Even pets understand that identity and social roles can be changed instantly through simple costume changes and voice imitation. There's no concept of authentic identity, just whatever performance someone decides to put on. The episode reveals that what we think of as SpongeBob's normal personality might actually be just one possible configuration that he's chosen or been told to adopt. When he becomes opposite SpongeBob, he turns into a pretty convincing Squidward imitation. This suggests his usual happy, energetic behavior could be just as artificial as his Opposite Day performance. Patrick's behavior during Opposite Day also reveals hidden capabilities. He participates in complex backward conversations and understands the rules well enough to play along successfully. His usual stupidity might be a chosen role rather than a natural limitation. The social construct theory explains why so many weird things happen in Bikini Bottom without anyone questioning them. Fish driving boats underwater, campfires burning on the ocean floor, beaches existing inside the ocean, all of this gets accepted because the society operates on collective agreement rather than physical laws or logical consistency. Squidward's plan backfires because he can't control how other people interpret and implement the rules he invented. Once he creates the social construct, it takes on a life of its own. SpongeBob and Patrick develop their own understanding of what opposite means and start applying it in ways Squidward never intended. The theory suggests that most social problems in Bikini Bottom could be solved if someone just announced new rules with enough confidence. Want to stop crime? Declare it Be Nice to Everyone Day. Want to fix the economy? Announce that Sharing Everything Day is now a monthly tradition. The population would probably go along with it immediately. This also explains why characters never seem to learn from experience or develop consistent relationships. If social reality can be restructured at any moment, then personal growth and long-term consequences become meaningless. Every episode resets the social rules back to whatever temporary configuration serves that story. The most disturbing aspect is that residents of Bikini Bottom might not have genuine personalities at all. What we see as character traits could just be social roles they've been assigned or chosen to play. SpongeBob acts optimistic. Squidward acts grumpy. Patrick acts dumb, but these might be changeable performances rather than authentic identities. The opposite day concept reveals that the entire foundation of Bikini Bottom society is built on shared pretending rather than shared reality. Everyone agrees to believe whatever story sounds most convincing in the moment, which creates a world where truth and fiction are completely interchangeable. This makes Bikini Bottom less like a real place and more like an ongoing improv performance where the actors can change the rules, setting, and even their own characters whenever they get bored. The only constant is everyone's willingness to play along with whatever new reality someone announces, no matter how bizarre or contradictory it might be. Next up is a disturbing theory about Patrick's hidden rage. In Valentine's Day, there's this really disturbing theory that Patrick might have some kind of explosive rage disorder that gets triggered whenever he feels emotionally hurt or left out. His violent breakdown in this episode is a full psychotic episode where he becomes genuinely dangerous to everyone around him. The episode starts with Patrick being super excited about getting what SpongeBob promises will be the greatest, the bestest, the most fantabulous present ever. Patrick gets so hyped up that he's bouncing around and rolling on the ground with excitement. But when things go wrong and SpongeBob can only give him a handshake, Patrick's reaction is way beyond normal disappointment. At first, Patrick tries to convince himself the handshake is okay. He's sitting there telling himself, it's the thought that counts, and trying to be reasonable about it. But then he starts seeing other people getting amazing gifts from SpongeBob: chocolates, roses, even a bike for someone he just met that morning. That's when Patrick completely snaps. His transformation is terrifying to watch. Patrick goes from trying to be understanding to throwing an innocent guy across the screen just for asking what time it is. The guy literally gets launched through the air because Patrick can't handle his emotional pain anymore. That's someone having a complete psychological break. The rampage gets progressively worse. Patrick starts banging his stomach like a gorilla and making angry grunting sounds like he's lost the ability to speak normally. He destroys carnival property, rips apart a guy in a heart costume, and starts terrorizing little kids. The PA system has to announce that there's a chubby pink starfish on the loose, like he's a wild animal that escaped from a zoo. What makes this really scary is how Patrick's face changes during the episode. He gets this evil, predatory look in his eyes and starts speaking in angry gibberish. Everyone around him is genuinely terrified, and they should be Patrick's acting like he might actually hurt people. When a little girl is eating a heart-shaped lollipop, he grabs it away from her and breaks it, making the kids scream in fear. The most disturbing part comes when Patrick corners everyone at the dock. He's got innocent people trapped against a dead end, and he's threatening them with violence. He tells the crowd, "They didn't get me anything either," and says he's going to hurt all of them. These people had nothing to do with his situation, but Patrick's so consumed with rage that he wants to take it out on random strangers. Patrick's threat to break something of SpongeBob's while looming over him with that evil expression shows how dangerous he can become. SpongeBob is genuinely scared of his best friend, and even asks, do they deserve this, about the innocent crowd. Patrick doesn't care he's so far gone that he wants to hurt everyone around him. This pattern shows up constantly throughout the entire series, not just in this episode. In I'm With Stupid, Patrick becomes physically aggressive when he thinks SpongeBob is making him look bad in front of his parents. He starts pushing SpongeBob around and getting increasingly violent as his embarrassment builds up. In Big Pink Loser, Patrick's jealousy over SpongeBob's awards leads to destructive behavior where he copies everything SpongeBob does, but with an underlying anger that makes everyone uncomfortable. When copying doesn't work, he starts getting hostile and resentful. During the Fry Cook games, Patrick's competitive side brings out genuine aggression towards SpongeBob. What starts as friendly competition turns into Patrick actively trying to hurt his best friend because he can't handle losing or being outperformed. In Naughty Nautical Neighbors, when SpongeBob and Squidward become friends and exclude Patrick, he starts scheming and manipulating to break up their friendship. His reaction to feeling left out is to actively sabotage other people's relationships. The pattern is always the same. Patrick feels hurt, excluded, or disappointed, then escalates to behavior that's way more intense and destructive than the situation calls for. He targets innocent people who weren't involved in whatever upset him, and he often can't be reasoned with once he gets worked up. Think about the secret box, where Patrick's secrecy about his box leads to increasingly paranoid and aggressive behavior towards SpongeBob. Or Nature Pants, where Patrick's reaction to SpongeBob wanting to live with jellyfish involves elaborate schemes to force him back, showing he can't accept his friend having independence. In Survival of the Idiots, Patrick's behavior in Sandy's tree dome becomes genuinely threatening. When he's cold and scared, instead of asking for help normally, he becomes aggressive and destructive, putting both himself and SpongeBob in real danger. The theory explains why SpongeBob is so patient with Patrick despite constantly getting hurt by their friendship. SpongeBob might actually be afraid of what Patrick would do if he tried to end their relationship or set boundaries. Patrick's Valentine's Day rampage shows he's capable of genuine violence when he feels abandoned or betrayed. What's really messed up is that Patrick seems to have no memory of how scary he becomes during these episodes. Once Sandy shows up with the chocolate balloon and Patrick gets his gift, he immediately returns to his normal happy self. He even tells SpongeBob, "You didn't have to get me anything," like he wasn't just threatening to hurt a bunch of innocent people 5 minutes earlier. This suggests Patrick might actually dissociate during his rage episodes. He gets so overwhelmed by negative emotions that he loses control of his behavior and doesn't remember what he did afterward. That would explain why he never seems to learn from these incidents or feel guilty about the damage he causes. The rage disorder theory also explains why Patrick's stupidity seems so inconsistent throughout the series. Sometimes he's genuinely clueless, but other times he shows he's capable of complex planning and manipulation. Maybe his dumb act is partly a defense mechanism to avoid situations that might trigger his explosive anger. People probably enable Patrick's behavior because they're scared of setting him off. It's easier to go along with his demands and treat him like a harmless idiot than to confront him and risk triggering one of his violent episodes. This keeps Patrick from learning healthier ways to handle disappointment and frustration. The most disturbing aspect is wondering what would have happened if Sandy hadn't shown up with the balloon. Patrick had a crowd of terrified people cornered and was threatening to hurt them. Would he have actually followed through on his threats? The episode cuts away before we find out, but Patrick's body language and tone suggest he was absolutely prepared to get violent. SpongeBob's extreme loyalty to Patrick might not just be friendship, it could be a trauma response. When someone you care about is capable of explosive violence, you learn to manage their emotions and avoid triggering their rage. SpongeBob's constant attempts to make Patrick happy and his willingness to sacrifice for him could be survival strategies. The Valentine's Day episode shows Patrick at his most dangerous, but it's not an isolated incident. Throughout the series, Patrick's emotional instability creates situations where people get hurt, property gets destroyed, and innocent bystanders become victims of his inability to handle disappointment like a normal person. Patrick's explosive rage disorder makes him one of the most genuinely frightening characters in the show, even though he's usually played for laughs. His violent outbursts reveal someone who loses complete control when his emotions get triggered, and who poses a real threat to everyone around him when that happens. The scariest part is that Patrick never gets help for his anger problems. Each episode resets and he goes back to being the lovable dumb starfish, but the capacity for violence is still there, waiting to explode the next time someone disappoints him or makes him feel left out. Here comes the next theory. SpongeBob and Patrick might bring out the worst in each other. In Pranks-A-Lot, there's this really disturbing theory that SpongeBob and Patrick turn into completely different people when they're together, and not in a good way. They become way more reckless and cruel than either of them would be on their own. The episode shows them starting with a simple prank idea about sitting on an invisible bench. But once they get together and start planning, things escalate really fast. They end up terrorizing the entire town, making people genuinely believe they're being haunted by ghosts. Sandy gets so scared she literally launches herself in an escape pod all the way back to Texas. Misses. Puff crashes around her house in total panic. They trap Mr. Krabs by gluing all the doors shut and replacing the windows with rubber. The scary part is how they react to people's terror. When Sandy screams and flees her home, SpongeBob and Patrick just laugh and say, "Boy, we really scared her." They're not concerned about her well-being at all. When Mrs. Puff is clearly traumatized, they just move on to their next victim. They're completely disconnected from the fact that they're causing real psychological damage to people. But here's what makes this theory really interesting. When SpongeBob and Patrick are alone in other episodes, they're usually more reasonable. SpongeBob by himself often shows guilt when he hurts people. In Hall Monitor, he feels bad when he realizes his actions caused citywide chaos. Patrick on his own can be selfish, but he's not usually actively malicious. It's when they get together that they become this toxic combination. They feed off each other's excitement and keep pushing things further and further without either one saying, "Maybe we should stop." Neither one acts as the voice of reason for the other. This pattern shows up constantly throughout the series. In Survival of the Idiots, they nearly freeze to death in Sandy's tree dome because neither one wants to admit their plan is stupid. They just keep encouraging each other to stay, even when it becomes life-threatening. In Hall Monitor, Patrick becomes SpongeBob's panicked accomplice instead of helping him think clearly. When SpongeBob starts freaking out about being lost, Patrick just makes everything worse by going along with the panic instead of being the calm friend who could help solve the problem. In Nature Pants, Patrick's schemes to get SpongeBob back from living with jellyfish become increasingly destructive. He could have just talked to SpongeBob, but instead, he keeps escalating with more and more elaborate plans that end up hurting everyone involved. The same thing happens in Pranks a Lot. They start with invisible spray and immediately start fighting over it, spraying each other until they're both invisible. Then, instead of going home to wash it off like they planned, they decide to scare people. Then, instead of doing one small scare, they decide to terrorize the entire town systematically. What's really messed up is how they hunt down victims. They don't just randomly scare people they encounter, they make a list and go after everyone in Bikini Bottom one by one. Sandy, Mrs. Puff, Squidward, random people at the beach. They're methodical about it, like they're trying to traumatize as many people as possible. The worst part is when they trap Mr. Krabs at the Krusty Krab. They don't just scare him, they make sure he can't escape by gluing the doors shut and replacing the glass with rubber. What if there had been a real emergency? What if Mr. Krabs had a heart attack from fear? They created a genuinely dangerous situation and thought it was hilarious. When they're together, SpongeBob and Patrick lose all sense of boundaries and empathy. They get so caught up in their shared excitement that they stop seeing other people as real individuals with feelings. Everyone else becomes just a target for their entertainment. This dynamic explains why so many episodes end with massive destruction when SpongeBob and Patrick team up. Individually, they might cause some problems, but together they become this unstoppable force of chaos that doesn't stop until someone gets seriously hurt or they face real consequences. The Pranks a Lot episode is just one example of how dangerous their friendship can become. They turn into these cold, calculating people who derive pleasure from other people's suffering, all while convincing themselves they're just having fun. It's not friendship, at that point, it's mutual enablement of their worst impulses. Look at how they prepare for their ghost act. They don't just stumble into scaring people, they plan it out. They realize the invisible spray makes them look like ghosts. Then they decide to exploit that to terrorize everyone. They cover themselves with sheets and practice their ghostly wails. This is premeditated psychological warfare against their neighbors. What makes their behavior even more disturbing is how they adapt their tactics for maximum terror. With Sandy, they move objects around her house and make spooky noises to build up the fear before revealing themselves. With Mrs. Puff, they wait until she's about to enjoy her cake before making it disappear in front of her. With the people at the beach, they choose the perfect moment to appear as a ghost surfboard. Each scare is customized to be as frightening as possible. Their complete lack of remorse becomes really obvious when they read the newspaper about their success. The headlines talk about the whole town being terrorized, but SpongeBob just says, "It's official. We're the greatest pranksters ever." They're proud of causing mass hysteria. They see other people's genuine fear and trauma as proof of how awesome they are. Even when they're caught by Mr. Krabs and publicly humiliated, they don't seem to learn anything about empathy or consequences. SpongeBob just says they should have bought the whoopee cushion instead, like the problem was choosing the wrong prank rather than terrorizing innocent people. This theory makes their friendship way more disturbing when you think about it. They're not just two harmless guys having adventures. They're two people who bring out each other's capacity for cruelty, and then act like victims when they face consequences for hurting others. Throughout the series, this pattern keeps repeating. In Rock Bottom, they get lost, but instead of working together to find a solution, they panic and make everything worse. In Wormy, they convince each other that Sandy's caterpillar is a monster and terrorize the whole town. In Life of Crime, they think they're criminals and start acting more and more destructively. The really scary thing is how their toxic dynamic spreads to other people. In episodes where they recruit others into their schemes, those people often end up getting hurt or in trouble. They don't just damage each other, they drag innocent bystanders into their chaos and then abandon them when things go wrong. What's most disturbing about Pranks a Lot is that it shows how far they're willing to go when nobody stops them. They systematically work their way through every person in town, causing psychological trauma to each one, and only stop when they're physically caught and exposed. If Mr. Krabs hadn't figured out their trick, they probably would have kept going until someone got seriously hurt or had a complete mental breakdown. This theory explains why so many characters in Bikini Bottom seem to have ongoing anxiety issues, and why the town faces so many crises. SpongeBob and Patrick's toxic friendship creates a constant source of chaos and trauma that affects everyone around them, all disguised as innocent fun between best friends. Up next is a wild theory about the Krusty Krab's hidden technology. In Squilliam Returns, there's this really wild theory that the Krusty Krab isn't just a simple burger joint. It's got some kind of hidden advanced technology system that can completely transform the building when needed. When Squidward desperately needs the restaurant to look fancy for Squilliam, something impossible happens. In just 20 minutes, the entire Krusty Krab transforms from a basic fast food place into a sophisticated 5-star restaurant with professional wallpaper, chandeliers, a full orchestra, and elegant dining setups. This isn't normal redecoration, this is instant architectural transformation. The speed of the change is the first clue something weird is going on. Squidward leaves the restaurant as a regular cashier and comes back to find it completely transformed. There's no way SpongeBob could have done all that redecorating by himself in such a short time, especially while also studying to become a fancy waiter. But here's where it gets really suspicious. The transformation isn't just cosmetic. The restaurant somehow acquires a full orchestra that wasn't there before. Where did these musicians come from? How did they get their instruments set up so quickly? It's like the building itself generated the entertainment. The wallpaper appears to be some kind of advanced material that can change patterns and designs on command. When everything falls apart at the end, the wallpaper literally rips off by itself, suggesting it was never real wallpaper but some kind of projection or smart surface technology. The chandelier and lighting systems also appear instantly. These aren't simple light fixtures, they're elaborate crystal chandeliers that require professional installation and electrical work. Yet they show up in minutes and disappear just as quickly when the emergency is over. This pattern of hidden technology shows up throughout the series, not just in this episode. The Krusty Krab consistently demonstrates capabilities that go way beyond what a normal restaurant should have. It's got advanced security systems, can withstand explosions and natural disasters, and sometimes shows equipment that seems more advanced than anything else in Bikini Bottom. In Plankton's army, the restaurant's security system activates automatically to protect the secret formula. In various episodes, the building repairs itself after major damage or reconfigures its layout when needed. The kitchen equipment often works in ways that seem impossible for normal appliances. In Krusty Krab training video, we see references to advanced technology and automated systems throughout the restaurant. The training materials talk about equipment and procedures that sound way more sophisticated than what you'd expect from a burger place. The theory suggests that Mr. Krabs either built or acquired military-grade technology for his restaurant, possibly left over from his Navy days. The Krusty Krab might actually be a repurposed military facility with advanced systems designed to adapt to different situations and threats. When Squidward desperately needs the restaurant to impress someone, the building's emergency protocols kick in. The system detects the crisis situation and automatically transforms the space to meet the requirements. It's like the restaurant has artificial intelligence that can analyze what's needed and reconfigure accordingly. The orchestra might be holographic projections or some kind of automated musical system. The elegant decor could be generated by advanced projection technology or smart materials that can change their appearance instantly. The whole transformation is managed by hidden computers that activate when they detect high stress levels from the employees. This would explain why the Krusty Krab is so successful despite having terrible management and chaotic working conditions. The building itself compensates for Mr. Krabs' shortcomings by providing technological solutions to problems before they become disasters. The restaurant's ability to serve massive crowds during rush periods makes more sense if it has automated systems helping with food preparation and service. The kitchen might have hidden equipment that assists with cooking and assembly when the demand gets too high for SpongeBob to handle alone. SpongeBob's incredible cooking abilities might be enhanced by the restaurant's technology. He's not just naturally gifted, he's working with advanced equipment that helps him create perfect food consistently. The spatula and grill could be connected to systems that optimize timing, temperature, and ingredient distribution. The secret formula's security isn't just about Mr. Krabs being paranoid. If the Krusty Krab really does have advanced technology, then the formula might contain information about how to operate or access these systems. Plankton isn't just trying to steal a recipe, he's trying to get control of military-grade restaurant technology. The building's transformation in Squilliam Returns reveals the full capabilities of these hidden systems. Under normal circumstances, the technology stays hidden to maintain the illusion of being a regular restaurant, but when faced with a genuine emergency that threatens the business, all the advanced features come online. What makes this theory really interesting is how the technology seems to know exactly what's needed. It specifically creates a sophisticated dining environment that would impress Squilliam. The system somehow analyzed the situation and determined what kind of transformation would be most effective. The instant the emergency is over and Squilliam leaves, everything returns to normal. The wallpaper falls off, the chandeliers disappear, and the restaurant goes back to its basic configuration. This suggests the advanced features are energy intensive and only used when absolutely necessary. Mr. Krabs probably doesn't even know about most of these capabilities. The technology might be left over from whoever owned the building before him, or it could be part of some government program that monitors and assists important businesses. The Krusty Krab's success makes it valuable to whatever organization installed these systems. The theory explains why so many weird things happen at the restaurant that never get explained. The building isn't just a setting for adventures, it's an active participant with its own hidden agenda and capabilities. Every time something impossible happens at the Krusty Krab, it might be the advanced technology working behind the scenes to keep the business running. This makes the Krusty Krab way more significant than just a local burger joint. It's potentially the most technologically advanced building in Bikini Bottom, disguised as a simple restaurant to hide its true capabilities from competitors and government agencies who might want to study or control the technology. Next up is a theory about SpongeBob's accidental successes. SpongeBob gets his biggest wins when he's not even trying to win. In Culture Shock, he really wants to be in the talent show but gets shut down for all his planned acts. Then he becomes the star just by doing his normal job. SpongeBob tries super hard to impress Squidward with different performance ideas. He shows off this bubble dancing thing where he blows bubbles that turn into a hippo with a hat and cane that tap dance together. Squidward just yawns and tells him nobody would want to see that. Then SpongeBob tries the amazing Mr. Absorbency where he sucks up water into different parts of his body. Squidward shuts that down too, saying nobody wants to see him puff up like a balloon. SpongeBob begs to be in the show, saying he'll do anything. Squidward finally gives him a job mopping up after the show. SpongeBob gets all emotional about it, talking about how this is his big break, and he's going to shape his destiny with that mop. You can tell he's really excited even though it's just cleaning. During the actual talent show, all the planned acts are pretty mixed. Pearl's cheerleading destroys the floor and sends people flying around, but she gets polite clapping. Gary does poetry that's just meow 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 over and over, which is pretty funny. Plankton tries a magic trick that's obviously just him trying to steal a Krabby Patty. Squidward's big dance performance with fancy costumes, lights, and classical music gets booed and people start throwing tomatoes at him. Then SpongeBob comes out to clean up the tomato mess. He's not trying to entertain anyone, he's just doing his job, mopping up the stage like he's supposed to. But the crowd goes absolutely nuts for it. They start cheering and clapping like he's the greatest thing they've ever seen. When SpongeBob stops mopping for a second, the crowd goes dead silent. The moment he starts mopping again, they cheer like crazy. When he leaves the stage, they're yelling for an encore. This isn't polite clapping like the other acts got, this is real excitement. Squidward sees how the crowd's reacting and thinks he can copy it. He pushes SpongeBob away and tries mopping himself, but the crowd goes completely quiet. He's doing the exact same thing, but it doesn't work because he's doing it for applause instead of actually trying to clean up. The pattern keeps happening throughout the rest of the show. Every time SpongeBob shows up and does his job, the crowd goes wild. Every time Squidward tries to copy it, they go silent. They even test it with just body parts. SpongeBob's arm gets cheers, Squidward's arm gets nothing. By the end, SpongeBob's parents are telling Mr. Krabs their son is a star, and Mr. Krabs is already planning weekly shows because of all the money they made. SpongeBob got exactly what he wanted to be recognized and successful, but not through any of his planned attempts. This same thing happens all the time in other episodes too. SpongeBob often messes up when he's trying really hard to do specific things, but succeeds when he's just being himself or focusing on his regular work. His biggest wins usually come from situations where winning wasn't even what he was thinking about. The really interesting part is that SpongeBob doesn't get why his mopping worked when his other acts didn't. He can't learn from this success because it wasn't on purpose. He probably still thinks his bubble dancing and water soaking were good ideas that just got unfairly rejected by Squidward. This explains why SpongeBob keeps doing the same stuff throughout the series. He doesn't realize that his natural excitement and real focus on doing things well is what actually impresses people. He thinks success comes from clever ideas and trying really hard, when really it comes from just being genuine about whatever he's doing. Squidward's failure to copy the mopping shows why other people can't just steal SpongeBob's accidental successes. Squidward understood what SpongeBob was doing on the surface, but missed the real reason behind it. SpongeBob was actually focused on cleaning up the mess properly, while Squidward was focused on getting people to clap for him. The theory also explains why SpongeBob stays so upbeat even when his plans fail a lot. His successes feel random and magical to him because he doesn't connect them to his honest approach to doing tasks. When his planned stuff fails, he doesn't get bummed out because he doesn't realize the planning itself might be what's messing him up. This creates this pattern where SpongeBob's real work, attitude, and excitement accidentally solve problems or make people happy, while his deliberate attempts to get recognition usually blow up in his face. The talent show becomes a perfect example of how being real beats putting on a show in SpongeBob's world. What makes this theory really solid is how it explains both SpongeBob's wins and his losses using the same idea. His planned performances fail because he's trying to force success to happen, but his natural behavior works because people respond to real excitement and caring about what you're doing. The episode shows that sometimes the most impressive thing you can do is just focus on doing your job really well, even when nobody's looking. SpongeBob's accidental fame comes from really caring about cleaning up the stage properly, not from wanting to entertain people. This pattern suggests that in Bikini Bottom, people can tell the difference between someone performing for attention and someone who's really into their work. The audience responds to SpongeBob's mopping because they can tell he's actually focused on doing it right, not because he's trying to put on a show. The theory shows something deeper about SpongeBob's character. His biggest strength isn't his creativity or his happy attitude. It's his ability to stay really focused on whatever task he's doing without worrying about how it looks to other people. That honest focus is what accidentally creates his most memorable successes. Think about how this applies to other episodes too. When SpongeBob is genuinely trying to help someone or solve a problem, he often stumbles into doing something amazing. But when he's specifically trying to look cool or impress people, things usually go wrong. His best moments come from caring more about the task than the recognition. The talent show also reveals something about how Bikini Bottom society works. People there seem to value authenticity and genuine effort over flashy performances. Squidward's elaborate dance routine fails not because it's technically bad, but because it feels fake and pretentious. SpongeBob's simple mopping succeeds because it's real and unpretentious. This might explain why SpongeBob is generally so well liked in Bikini Bottom despite being kind of weird. People respond to his genuine nature, even when his enthusiasm gets annoying. He's not trying to manipulate anyone or put on an act, he just really cares about doing things well and making people happy. The accidental success theory also suggests that SpongeBob's failures might actually be protecting him from becoming egotistical or fake. If his planned attempts always worked, he might start calculating everything and lose the authenticity that makes his real successes possible. His failures keep him humble and focused on just doing good work. That's the end of today's video. If you guys enjoyed our video, then subscribe to our channel and I'll see you in the next one.